Okay.
Yeah, let's make sure everybody gets in.
All set?
Hang on for 1 second. People are still coming in.
Oh,
I think you're good to go, Dennis.
okay. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to welcome you to the excuse me, I'm sorry, February 2022 meeting of the Brighton Zoning Board of Appeals. Just quickly, for those of you who don't know, well, let's call the meeting to order, Rick. Well, I'm going to sneeze again. I'm so sorry. Can you call the roll, please?
You certainly can. Mr. Primo,
Here.
Ms. Schwartz,
Here.
Ms. Tompkins Wright,
Here.
Mr. Mites,
Here.
Ms. McKay Drury,
Here.
Ms. Schmidt.
Here.
Please let the record show all members are present.
Okay, very good. And Rick, was the meeting properly advertised?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as advertised in the Daily Record of January 27th, 2022.
Okay, very good. So just to let everyone on the Zoom call how we handle this meeting, if you're not familiar, we go through the agenda as it was published. When your application is called, you would announce yourself. We'll make sure that you're in proper view to present your application. You'll present it. The members will ask any questions they wish. Once they finish asking questions, we'll ask anyone on the Zoom call that might like to speak regarding the application to speak. And once they finish, then we will close the public hearing and move to the next application. After we complete them all, we then take maybe a break if we need it. If not, then we start deliberating in the order that the applications were presented. And you're welcome to listen to that deliberation. There is no discussion with the board members or additional information accepted or taken. And then we render our decision. If you choose not to stay on the call and listen till the end, you can call Rick DiStefano in the building office tomorrow and he will give you the result of your application. Okay, so we have a couple minutes to go over, Rick.
Yeah, just before that, Mr. Chairman, let me just state that we did receive 2 communications in regard to application 2A-01-22 very late in the day today, which did not make the agenda. So I'll just make that comment for the record.
Okay. Okay, we can discuss that during the presentation then and how we'd like to handle that. Okay, very good. All right, so minutes. Do we have issues on the minutes? Judy, go right ahead.
Okay. On page 32, line 13, the third word should be BE. On page 39, line 5, it should be setbacks ARE. Page 44, line 16, insert the word we after so we. Page 57, line 2, insert the word see after can see. Page 56, line 2, the word is presence, PRESENTS. Page 65, line 2, towards the end, the word is shed. Page 67, the last word on line 5 is back, BACK. Page 89, the line 17, the word should be druthers. Page 93, line 3, insert the word need, do need 10. Page 97, line 10, the first word should be following. Page 98, line 19, insert the word go after could. Line 21, insert the word we after what. Page 101, the last word in line 6, I believe should be creek. And on page 116, line 19, the second word should be stay. And that's all I have.
Okay, does anyone have anything else?
Move we approve the minutes as amended.
Okay, and a second, please.
I'll second. All right.
Okay,
The motion is to approve the December minutes with corrections. Mr. Primo,
Yes.
Ms. Schwartz,
Yes,
Ms. Tompkins Wright,
Yes.
Mr. Mites,
yes,
Ms. McKay Drury,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt.
Yes.
Minutes are approved with corrections.
okay, very good. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to tell us, Rick, about the agenda or anything?
No, unless any members have questions regarding any of the applications.
Okay, well, when you're ready, please begin with 12/8/01/21.
I'll read the next. The first two together. Application 12/8/03/21, application of Jerry Golden, attorney, and Jagdish Kawar, owner of property located at 30 Jefferson Road, for a use variance in section 203-93A to allow retail store to be located in an IG light industrial district. We're not allowed by code. I'll describe an application and plans on file. And application 12/8/04/21, application of Jerry Goldman, attorney, Jagdish Kawar, owner of property located at 30 Jefferson Road, for an area variance in section 205-18A to allow front yard parking where not allowed by code. I'll describe an application and plans on file.
Okay, very good. And who do we have speaking for these applications?
Hi, good evening. It's Betsy Brugg. I am representing this application tonight.
Okay,
With me
wonderful.
is Amanpreet Singh, whose family owns the property.
Okay, very good, Betsy. When you're ready, then please proceed.
Sure. Good evening. Nice to see everyone, even if it's still on the small screen here. So some of the board members probably are familiar with this property from years ago. This is a property at 30 Jefferson Road. It's at the corner of Jefferson and East River Road at the very edge of the town of Brighton. It's a property that has had a history of challenges over the years. The current applications before you are for essentially a reinstatement and a reduction of a previous use variance and an area variance. The property it's a vacant gas station with a canopy. The current owners, after owning this property for many years and having marketed it for really any type of use, they really have marketed it without any kind of restrictions and have not been able to get much interest in the property since they acquired it. They themselves are business owners and operators, and so they've decided that they are going to open a liquor store here and clean up the property. The property has basically been vacant since about 2002. The gas station building is still there. The canopy is still there. The tanks were removed a number of years ago, I think by the prior owner. The condition of the property, you really can't see it because it's all covered in snow right now, but all of the asphalt is really deteriorated. It's down to its subsurface. There's weeds growing everywhere and it's really a mess. So the proposal is to clean it up, operate a liquor store there, clean up the parking. They would reduce the amount of asphalt and pavement, tighten that up. The gas station canopy would be removed, and essentially the site would be really cleaned up and made viable again, and they would operate a liquor store there. As the board may know from the history of this property, there was a use variance granted for the operation of the retail convenience store and gas station. Multiple variances were granted for the canopy. Those variances were renewed year after year, I think from about 2002 to about 2010 or so. I might be wrong on the year it lapsed, but eventually the variances just lapsed as the property remained vacant throughout that time. Multiple commercial brokers have had the listings over the years. You have a couple letters, I think, from the current broker describing their marketing efforts and the various challenges marketing the property for permitted uses. It is in the industrial zoning district, but it is a very small building. It is 1,600 square feet measured on the exterior. You have a letter from the architect. I think the interior is about 1,400. He describes some of the challenges with the renovation and the size of the property and what its viable use would be. Essentially, the uses that are largely allowed in the industrial district are a variety of types of business office type uses. This is a very small building. It really is most suitable for a retail use. That is, what it was essentially constructed for. So we're here for two variances. One is for a use variance. Again, this is a lesser variance than was granted before, because we're going to, or just a straight retail for the liquor store, as opposed to the gas station that was included in the previous variance. The area variances, the only variance we're requesting, again, it's a reinstatement of a variance that's been granted in the past multiple times, is to allow parking in the front yard. In the submission, you have a site plan that's marked up to show you that it is actually physically impossible to construct anything code compliant on this property. You actually cannot build any type of a building because this is a non-conforming lot. The lot size is, approximately half of what code would require. I think that's the depth of the lot also is, 150 feet. Code requires 200 feet. So it's a non-compliant lot. This is a big improvement to the existing condition. These are experienced business operators, so they think they can, make a go of it. And that is essentially their proposal. As far as the variance standards, it's been a few years since the board has seen this property. So we did put in evidence of the financial hardship. Essentially, the cost of improving this property for permitted uses would exceed the market value of the property for permitted uses. We are in a very kind of isolated area. There aren't a lot of neighboring uses. It's largely industrial. We're adjacent to other industrial. There's, significant vacant property in the area. Again, the broker kind of detailed some of the challenges with the neighborhood and the neighborhood character and how really it's not suitable for permitted uses, partly because of the character of the neighborhood, partly because of other available property. And again, the cost of the renovation and the amount of investment that would be required to make this appropriate for a permitted use. And there's just other locations in the town that are more suitable for office type uses. And there's a lot of competition. We're on the line with Henrietta. And I think he comments on the fact that, you're competing with Henrietta's space. Again, there's a lot of vacant office space in Henrietta. The tax rate is favorable in Henrietta. So there's a lot of reasons that this property just has not been successful. It's been demonstrated in the past and nothing has really changed, in that respect. So I'd be happy to go through more of the data that we've given you if you'd like. As far as the area variance for the parking, again, we're improving on the existing conditions. It's a significant improvement to the physical condition of the property, to clean up the pavement, improve the appearance of the property, reduce the amount of asphalt. The amount of parking that's proposed is appropriate, to support the use of the building without being, excessive. It's a small building. It's going to be a low intensity type of an operation, low intensity use. We did address the area variance criteria in writing as well. And again, I would be happy to go through them. I know you've got a long agenda, but I do think that we've satisfied all of the criteria for both the granting of the use variance and the area variance.
Okay, thanks, Betsy. Questions by the board?
Yes, Judy, you talked about improving the site and so forth. Will you be able to put any landscaping between the road and your front yard parking?
I think there is some space there to do that. We don't show anything on the plan, but that certainly would be possible.
That would soften it a bit. That would, thank
Mhm.
you.
Yep.
I believe you do have a revised or a site plan in the packet. Brendan, can you scroll down one? I think there might
Oh.
be a rendering.
Yeah. but
I
it
could
doesn't-
be
This is all
mistaken.
I've got.
That's all you got?
Okay,
This is Member Wright. Can you tell us, the previous use was a gas station with attendant retail. Do you know if there was alcohol, not necessarily liquor, but beer sold at that gas station when it was operating?
So I believe, I was not involved at the time, but I believe at one point there was a restriction and then I believe that restriction was removed. And I think part of the reason is I think there was I think it's actually preempted, but I think that I'm not sure what the issue was at the time because I didn't handle the application. But I do believe that they were able to get that restriction removed.
And then, Rick, this is probably more of a question for you, but just something I want kind of addressed. Our zoning code addresses liquor stores in the same way that it addresses all other retail stores in the city. It's not as if retail liquor stores are permitted in some zones versus other, it's just straight retail.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
On your screen, Judy, you can see what they've got to propose for some landscaping and site improvements.
Thank you.
right,
Thanks, Rick.
okay. Are there other questions by the board related to these applications, plural?
So Betsy, you feel that the parking that you show on the site is the maximum or the amount that you're going to need for this use, and don't propose any additional front yard disturbance?
No, they're actually cleaning it up, tightening it up. I believe we're removing some of the asphalt. There's, I think, more than what's required by code. It provides, good traffic circulation for vehicles to enter and exit, trucks if necessary, so.
And just for the board's knowledge, this does need to go in front of the planning board for site plan modification. So it will be looked at by both the conservation board and the planning board as it moves forward.
Okay. All right, other questions by the board members? Okay, very good. Thank you, Betsy.
Great, thanks.
Okay. All right, is there anyone on this call that would like to speak regarding application 12A03 or 12A04?
If there is, please use your raise your hand function for the Zoom.
Okay, do we see anything? Doesn't look like it. Okay, then at this point, then the public hearing is closed on these two applications.
Thank you.
Okay,
Two applications I will again read together. Application 1A0322, application FSI Construction, Frank Ambergia, owner of property located 3300 Brighton Henry Town Line Road for an area variance in section 205-8 to allow an office building to be constructed with a 42-foot front setback in lieu of the minimum 75-foot front setback required by code. I'll describe an application and plans on file. Application 1A0422, same applicant, same location for an area variance in section 203-129B to allow a new office building and other site improvements to encroach into the 100-foot natural vegetative watercourse environmental protection overlay district buffer were not allowed by code. I'll describe plans on application, plans on file. And Mr. Chairman, I am going to bump up application 2A0222 because this is the same property owner for an area variance in section 203-164A to allow front yard parking where not allowed by code. I'll describe an application and plans on file.
okay. Very good. Okay, and who do we have speaking for, I guess, all three applications?
Good evening. My name is Jess Sudol with Passero Associates here on behalf of FSI Construction, Frankenbergia.
Okay, very good, Jeff. So when you're ready, please proceed. And if you could just walk down through them in order and speak to each of the applications.
Sure. Well, good evening, members of the board. This is actually an application that was originally heard over 2 years ago, back in 2019. At that point, based on work with both this board and also the Planning Board and Conservation Board, we went through a number of iterations with this parcel to try and arrive at the best possible layout for the site, working against several site constraints, notably the geometry of the parcel itself. There's a tributary along the west and north side, and also the setbacks and EPOD limitations. The site itself is 2.2 acres, located on the north side of Brighton Henrietta Town Line Road, just west of Winton Road. It's a 10,000 square foot medical office building, which is approximately half of what would be normally allowed by code, just sheerly based on the density requirements and the size of the lot. Excuse me. So we essentially have three variances here, which are all interrelated. The encroachment into the EPOD, which is a 100-foot setback off of the tributary that I previously mentioned, and then the front setback for the building itself, and also the parking in the front yard, which you can see all of that on the site plan that's in front of you. Essentially what we arrived at when we originally went through this back in 2019 was the more north-south oriented building configuration and rectangle. What we're doing here is we're taking advantage of the area that's been previously disturbed based on the existing use there, which is a single family home. And we're trying to preserve the areas that are, within the EPOD and in the floodplain. In terms of the north-south configuration, which is requiring the front setback for the building and the parking for the front yard, we're kind of wedged in between the EPOD limits and the front setbacks. So similar to the previous application, it's essentially impossible here to bring forth a proposal that does not encroach in one of those two. And what we've done here, and what we did really 2 years ago, nothing has changed from then, is essentially a balancing act of trying to limit our impact both in the, along the front yard, along Brighton Henrietta Town Line Road, and along that EPOD to the north. If you're familiar with the corridor, there are other buildings and pavement on adjacent uses that have a consistent setback with what we're currently proposing. So it's certainly not out of the character with the community. The current layout maximizes our ability to provide a riparian buffer along that previously mentioned creek, and to also landscape that front yard to provide some mitigation for the potential impact for both the parking and the building. You can see some of that here on this plan. So I'm not sure how many members of this board were there in 2019 when we spent a lot more time going through these iterations. But I do think it's important to mention that nothing has changed then. What happened to our applicant is the same thing that's happened to a lot of people in the construction industry. That is, between COVID and the rising construction prices, it's taken them a while to get the financial numbers to work. So we did file for a couple of extensions, which have since expired. We believe we're to the point now that we can execute the project, and hence are pursuing the approvals of the variance. Subsequently, we will be going before the planning board to request site plan approval, which has also expired. But again, absolutely nothing has changed in the last 2 years since the board has seen this project. So with that, happy to answer any questions specific to any of the three variances and go from there.
Okay,
Judy?
question, Judy?
Yes. Do you have a specific medical tenant?
Not yet. We have a multitude of interested parties, but nobody is willing to sign a letter of intent until we can demonstrate that we have a site plan approval and all required entitlements. So until we have all those items in place, we can't secure a tenant that we would be able to disclose.
Okay, so you are assuming that you would have more than one tenant, perhaps?
Potentially, to be honest, it's a 10,000 square foot building. We would love it if it was a single tenant. That would be the easiest and cleanest. But we are keeping our options.
Okay, the reason I ask is that you could probably, in my opinion, avoid most of these problems if you considered a two-story building, half the footprint, saving the environment, and certainly the setback. I mean, it's really close. So my question is, did you consider a two-story building?
We did, and at Pass Row, we do a lot of these types of buildings, and really, in order for a two-story building to be financially viable, not just on this site, but really anywhere USA, you have to have a building footprint of at least 15,000 square feet, probably closer to 20. And the reason for that is if you do the simple math and you say, okay, instead of a 10,000 square foot, let's do a 5,000 square foot building. Now, keep in mind that the parking requirement would still be the same, and it would not impact the parking variance or the encroachment into the E-Pod, but it would simply reduce the building footprint, which would allow us to reduce that setback. The problem is when you follow the building code and you start to incorporate areas for circulation and elevators and multiple staircases, very quickly the buildings become much more expensive and much more inefficient with less square footage. So until you can really get to a 16,000 square foot footprint and above, it's very detrimental for this type of medical use to go to a second story.
Okay. So follow-up questions, Judy, anything?
And and as the building is facing us, what will that elevation look like facing Town Line Road?
The elevation is on file with the town. I'm not sure if Mr. DeStefano has the ability to pull it up or not, but it did go through an extensive review with the Town Architectural Review Board as part of the original approvals.
And so the building would look identical to what you proposed 2 years ago? Is what you're
Yes,
saying?
it would. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, there's been essentially, well, there's really been zero changes to the application since it was last presented.
Yes, Judy, and Architecture Review Board approvals do not expire.
They are, okay. And they did approve it, is what you're saying?
Yeah, they
Yes.
approved it originally as part of their, their final approvals from the planning board 3 years ago.
Okay,
And those ARB approvals don't change. So we would verify that it was the same prior to them being able to pull a building permit.
okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions by the board members? Yeah, we did, spend quite a bit of time on this the last time, and I think since nothing's really changed in the application, that's good. There's not a lot else to sort out. And so I have no other questions, but I guess at this point then, we will find out if anyone on this call would like to speak regarding this application or these applications, plural. Okay, there being none, then the public hearing on these 3 applications is closed, and thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Application 1A0522, application of Lindsey Agar, owner of property located 387 Bray Avenue for an area variance in section 209-10 to allow livable floor area after construction of addition to be 3,415 square feet and move the maximum 3,024.8 square feet allowed by code. We heard this at the January meeting and the public hearing remains open.
Okay, and who do we have speaking for Bray?
Thank you for unmuting me. Lindsey Agar here, and then I also have the architect, Patrick Morabito.
Okay, Lindsay, can you just give us your address for the record, please?
Yep, my current address is 387 Bray Avenue, Rochester, New York, 14618.
Okay, go right ahead and please proceed.
All right, so I can just take it up from where we kind of left off in the
Yeah.
clarifications?
Yeah, you submitted some clarifications, whatever you should present, what changes or what additional information or what else you have
Great.
to offer us, please.
So the board had requested some additional data, and I provided it down. I think it was down rather than up. So if we could scroll
Sure.
still further. maybe too far. There. Thank you very much. So I did remove from my original list, you'll see I crossed out 39 antlers. That was my mistake. I did not realize that antlers continued across the street on Elmwood. So that's not in the Meadowbrook neighborhood. So that's why that's crossed out. So what you see here is I compared the lot size to the square footage size and then calculated up the maximum square footage allowance for the lot size for the houses that I had discussed about previously, and then calculated out what the overages would be, if there were any. And then just because I like data, I was curious, what the percentage of overage was. So that's the overage as a percentage of the whole is the first percentage, and then overage as a percentage of the maximum allowed is the second percentage. And then I think at the very bottom, you will see where 387 as proposed would come in. So it would be 390 square feet above, which is 0.13, or of that size is 11% of the total as proposed, and it would be 13% above the maximum allowed. I'm so sorry. I thought I had sorted this differently, but obviously I did not. You can see up towards the top, there are some other houses in the neighborhood that do go from 0.13% all the way up to 0.31%. Mainly it's just those three larger ones on the top. And then I additionally went around and took some pictures just so you guys would have a visual if you weren't familiar with driving around in the neighborhood of some of these houses to see that size-wise and how they're built out, because I know some of the concern was that there's that what I'm proposing is essentially more than doubling the current size, and would it be stick out like a sore thumb in the neighborhood. So I wanted to show you guys kind of the look and feel of what's around for what people have modified. And then I brought my architect, Pat, and he's welcome to speak as well, to speak to the question about how that extra square footage kind of was created by, from my understanding, the angle of the, sorry, my dog's distracting me with his bell, the angle of the garage and how it had to be adjusted to allow for safe passage of the corner of the house.
Okay,
Yes, I will start talking. This is Patrick Morbido. I'm the architect for the project.
just give us an address, Pat, would you please, just for the record, please?
My address is 121 Sully's Trail, Suite 4, Pittsford, New York, 14534.
Okay, go ahead.
Patrick, just before you start, can I ask Brendan just to move back up to the site plan so we can look at that footprint?
Yeah, you might want to go up to the site plan, and then we can maybe scroll down through the plan itself, and I can describe a little bit about what was done and why we have a variance request.
Okay,
Okay, so this house is one of the really cute tutors on Bonnie Bray and in that entire neighborhood. It's one of my favorite neighborhoods. Anyway, and it had a attached garage and a sort of a trellis on the back side of the garage. We're removing that existing garage, and as when Lindsey hired us to work on her project, it was twofold. One of them was to renovate her kitchen, provide a family room, and generally the space that the garage takes up, and then put in a brand new garage that would be able to to store 2 vehicles. And then put a master bedroom up on the second floor, and also then create a space that her mom could move into and they could be together. As you know, as mom gets older, and it would be a really nice thing to be able to do that. So anyway, when we developed this footprint, I don't know if you've noticed that in the letter that I sent you, basically, our lot coverage is only 21.5. I could get my glasses. Yeah, it's 21.5 and 25% is allowed. So the problem in the variance application for the extra square footage is not lot coverage. Basically, it's the space generated over the garage to create her mother's apartment. Her mother's apartment is roughly 500, a little over 500 square feet, and 400 of it is out of compliance with the zoning requirements. So, you know, we had talked about thinking about maybe adjusting the footprint and trying to pull the garage closer to the front yard. My concern for that is being able to maneuver vehicles in and out properly and without taking the side of the house out. So I don't feel that that's necessarily the right answer. But as I mentioned, the bulk of this square footage that's over the maximum allowable is the space that's generated over the garage. If I took that space and made it if it wasn't finished area over the garage, we would not be before you. But you know what I'm saying? Anyway, we'll leave it at that. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Could you, Pat, could you just tell us, you know, the size of, we'll call the suite, the 500 square feet, you know, what other alternatives were there? Is it the minimum? How did you approach the size of that area?
Well, perhaps you could scroll down to the second floor plan, the proposed second floor plan, and I can kind of walk you through what it is. Okay. So that the mother's area is the area over the garage, which includes the sitting area, the kitchen, which has a little kitchen in it, a bath and a bedroom. So what we wanted to try, what Lindsay's goal was to not only provide a space for her mom to be able to share the house, if you will, but also a way that a place she could go and have some privacy and have some autonomy. And that's why we ended up doing this scenario. Even if we took and limited this project to a bedroom and a bathroom, I still think we would be over. Because again, the area that is the sitting area, bath 3, bedroom, landing going down to the first floor, that's pretty close to, it's a little over 500 square feet. I could open my CAD file and because I have the numbers on there if you want to know.
That's close enough, I think.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
but it's basically 500 square feet.
Right.
So in order to comply, I'd have to make that space 100 square feet. And we all know that that's not going to work. I mean, it just physically doesn't work from a functional standpoint. I mean, it's a 10 by 10 space, basically.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's really what drove this. Again, if that space was unfinished, there would be no variance application because we would be a couple hundred square, or at least 100 square feet under the maximum. So
Okay,
it's all kind of underneath. It's kind of all underneath the envelope of, or the envelope of the building. I mean, anyway, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay. All right, so questions by the board, other board members, please?
Yeah, and this is Member Primo. The addition for the mother's area, that will still be part of the overall house, correct? It won't be a separate living unit?
Oh, it's part of the house, yes. It's not a separate, not meant to be a separate living unit.
And I don't know if this is to Ms. Agar or to you, but one thing I think we may consider is a condition that it be considered part of the house, that it remains a single family home, and that there will not be a separate living unit established there. Is that agreeable?
Yes, that is. I think we talked about that last time as well.
Yes,
If I remember, yep, and that would be
Yep.
perfectly agreeable.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Questions by the rest of the board, please?
I did forget to let you guys know that one of my neighbors had sent an email to me to send over to you guys, and I did include that in the packet. Because I know that was a question about if the neighbors were in support or not.
Okay,
Sorry about forgetting that.
all right. Okay,
Just one question, Mr. Chairman, for Pat.
yes,
So basically, Pat, what you're saying is that if this was an open garage, open rafter garage, the look from the street or the look from a neighbor, you're not gonna be able to tell the difference from just the garage there, or if that garage had a finished second floor, correct?
The only thing you would notice different, it would have been that side dormer. If you look at the front elevation page, and you look at the straight on elevation of the garage, you see a shed dormer coming off the side
but that-
there. That's the
but that
only
could be-
difference.
That could be an architectural feature, again, regardless if there was.
Exactly,
living
places.
space or not, right?
exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, very good. Okay, any other questions by the board members? Okay, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak regarding this application, 1A05? Okay, there being none, then the public hearing's closed.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Application 1A0622, application of Clinton Signs Incorporated, agent, and Durrell Incorporated, owner of properties located at 2654 West Herndon Road and 2674 West Herndon Road for sign variances from section 207-32B to, excuse me, to allow for the installation of non-business identification signs on 2 buildings frontage were not allowed by code. All described in application and plans on file.
Okay, and who do we have speaking for this application?
Mike, you should have Mike Mamano.
I'm trying.
Okay,
Good evening. My name is Mike Mamano. I'm with Clinton Signs, 1407 Empire Boulevard in Webster. And also we have Mike Hobbs with me as well, speaking on our sign proposal. We provided quite a few drawings and quite a bit of information as what we propose to do at the Conway site. There is quite a bit of signage there that we would like to take down and remove and dispose of. And there's a couple signs we want to add, as well as a couple we want to move around. It is a little bit confusing. On our proposal, I can give you all the square footages and I can tell you what's being deleted, what's being moved, and if you reference the drawings we provided, it might help a little as well. The site is 2 property addresses. If we go right to the first drawing, which we're calling PG1, that one right there. We are going to remove pretty much everything you see on the over the Conway Volvo truck and bus and the 2 cabinets above, as well as the little service hour sign to the right. And then in our after photo, the new signage would be the Conway Beam Truck Group. And then to the left of it, a parts sign. They're juggling buildings back and forth over there from what used to be service and sales and parts So they're trying to obviously identify entrances so they can get the customers in the right place now. Any questions on that?
Can you just describe the signs for us, just for the record?
The removals are independent HO high output light box cabinets. The removals of the Empire, the leasing and the Volvo. The Volvo sign we're going to relocate the Volvo sign. And the Conway letters on that portion of the building are just plastic letters. Those will be removed and eliminated. The new sign is going to be an aluminum cabinet with individual LED letters on the face of the cabinet. The Conway beam as well as the park sign, and the sizes are called out in the drawings there.
So what's gonna light up, Pat, would
Just
be
the white.
just the letters
Right,
themselves?
just the correct, yeah. The blue is a background.
Okay,
Okay. On the next drawing, which we're calling PG2. Okay. We're going to leave the Mac sign where it is. We're going to take down that small service department with the hours. We're going to eliminate that. We're going to pull that Volvo sign from the other building and put it on this building. And leave the Cumming sign. I think we got to shuffle the Cumming sign a little to the right to make everything fit properly. Okay.
So
And then
Mike, the
Yes.
Mac sign, obviously the Mac sign and the coming sign are currently there.
Yes.
Do you
Yeah.
know if
Do
you
go on.
know if there's ever any variances or anything for those non-business identification
was-
signs?
I don't know. That was pretty much before my time. That's kind of why we're putting all this proposal together. We're encompassing everything that's on the building and calling out all the square footages. If you look at the beginning of our proposal, we're showing that we're going to actually be eliminating 10 signs at 377 square feet. And we're going to only add 3 new signs at 152 square feet. So if you look at the grand scheme of things, there's a lot is going away. Whether it was permitted or variance previously, I'm sure there may be some existing variances I don't know about, but
Rick, the issue on that elevation, the one we're looking at, is not probably square footage, it's the multiplicity of the signs.
Well, it's not even the number of signs because it's the fact that they're not business identification signs. They're product signs, basically. And the code is specific that you can allow for business identification only. So product signs is what requires the variance.
So at this point, there are no variances for this elevation?
Not that I'm aware of, no. So I was curious, just that those signs might be up there for eons. I don't know. They may have just gone up without necessary approvals. I'm not sure, but at this point in time, I think what we need to do is look at it as a whole and make sure that the variances that we approve, if we approve variances, encompass all of the signage, whether it's existing or proposed, to allow for what they're asking.
Okay, that certainly makes sense. But you couldn't find anything related to
No.
this building. Yeah.
No, I couldn't.
Okay, questions by the board members, please. Anything? Okay, very good. Mike,
Right.
go
This is
ahead.
number right. Sorry, I had trouble getting to the unmute button. Do we have other, I guess this is more for Rick and Dennis, have we approved other car dealerships, repair service businesses,
Yeah.
et cetera, with
Yes.
that sort of vendor signage or product signage?
Yes, we have, Andrea. I think the most obvious one is the Cortese Dodge Ram Jeep building. They basically have their Cortese dealership, and then we allowed for them to also have Dodge Ram Jeep on the building.
Okay. All right,
And
thanks.
also I believe the Kia, the Hyundai dealership on the opposite side of the road, they came in a number of years ago for some service signs, part signs that we did permit to be on the front part of that building. face.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, those move a
So
little. toward-
this is somewhat common for, this type of business on.
This business, okay.
Sunday Road, right?
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, other questions by the board? Okay, very good. Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak? The audience, oh boy. Anybody on the call that would like to speak to this application? Okay, there being none, then the public hearing is closed.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Application 2A0122, application of Danielle SPC LLC, owner of property located at 2740 Monroe Avenue for an area variance from sections 203-84B 20A and 203-84B 20, I think it's C, to allow for outdoor storage in a side yard, unscreened, in lieu of the rear yard screened by a 6-foot high fence as required by code. Also have an application of plans on file.
Okay, very good. Who is speaking for this application, please?
Jerry's here.
Okay,
Yeah, hang on. We'll get you guys.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Jerry Goldman. I'm the attorney and agent for Danielle SPC LLC, the developer of the Whole Foods Plaza. The Whole Foods Plaza is located primarily in the BF2 zoning district and has received incentive zoning approval to allow for certain incentives, which basically are variations from the code in exchange for amenities. That was done through the town board. As we have gone forward and developed the site and the site plan, various tenants have come to us with requests, some of which require a variance. In this particular case, the Whole Foods store has requested the ability to put outdoor display in front of their store. With me this evening on this application is Anthony Danielle. We're here this evening to ask for a couple of variances because outdoor display and storage is allowed with a conditional use permit in the BF2 district under section 283-84B. But there are two issues relative to that. One is that there's a requirement that outdoor storage and display be in the rear yard, and in addition that the outdoor storage and display be behind a 6-foot fence. I think that is more practically applicable to outdoor storage, or perhaps outdoor display if you're like a Home Depot or some other use where you would have materials fenced in some area. But outdoor display in general is something which typically has occurred in front of stores throughout the town and elsewhere. Whole Foods is looking for similar relief to allow that to occur here. I have provided a few slides which I think that Rick or Brandon can display, showing in town where we have those particular displays out in front. First one, it's not in the application materials. It's in, there were separate slides, so I'm not sure if they're in there or not. If you don't have them available, I can tell you orally where they are.
We do have them. It'll just take us a second to get to them, Jerry.
Okay, that's fine. What we are seeking tonight is area variance relief from those two particular sections. We understand that the board may not be voting on this tonight. We may be awaiting the planning board. In addition, I don't know if county planning has come back with their review. So we are here tonight to pretty much introduce and to explain our proposal, and to seek the board's review. The first slide that we have is the 7-Eleven store, which is located at South Clinton and Elmwood. As you can see from the slide, there's a lot of merchandise out in front of the store, and that's not untypical. Second slide, I believe we have is Wider's Hardware, which is near the 12 Corners on Monroe Avenue. And in that particular store, we do have storage, which is out in front as well. And it's depicted right there. Typically food stores do have these displays, and we couldn't get a picture of Tops because Tops right now in Brighton, because of the seasonal considerations, really doesn't have anything outside. But we do have 2 slides from Wegmans stores, and we had 2 slides from Whole Foods. And just like to point out on these, that the merchandisers generally do a very good job of keeping these displays in order. And the Whole Foods ones, you can see in particular, are pretty well contained and pretty well shown. So to that extent, we believe that relief would be appropriate for this type of display. We have area variance standards, as you know, that we have to consider. The primary variance standard is the benefit to the applicant as opposed to a detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood. Certainly, the applicant and the user is benefited by being able to display their goods out in front, generally seasonal. So to that extent, there is a visual amenity of bringing a new and fresh look to the front of the store. We do not perceive any detriment to the public health, safety, and welfare. In addition to that primary legal standard, we have 5 measuring standards which also have to be evaluated, and they're called out in our letter of intent. We do not believe that there's an undesirable change produced in the character of the neighborhood. We also believe that the benefit cannot be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance. We don't believe that this should be considered substantial to the extent that it is contained and it does rotate and is seasonal. In addition to that, we have no impact on the physical or environmental conditions of the neighborhood. This type of display is common. So to that extent, we have some degree of self-creation, but because it is common, is not a disqualifying standard for an area variance. I understand that the letter or 2 letters or 3 letters or whatever did come in relative to this application. We haven't seen them. I assume that since on the Zoom, we have the attorneys for Brighton Grassroots and Save Monroe Ave Inc. Present, as well as an attorney representative for Clover Allens Creek Neighborhood Association, that I'll be hearing for the first time what the arguments are. If in fact they're legal in nature, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to reserve a couple of minutes to be able not to address anything factual, but to perhaps make a comment on the legal arguments that may be presented. Anthony, I don't know if you have anything to add at this point.
Okay.
I don't know if he can be unmuted if he does.
Brendan, can you please unmute Anthony and Danielle, just in case they want to speak?
Yeah, I believe I'm unmuted. So, I certainly appreciate this board taking.
Anthony, can you just give us your address for the record, please?
I'm sorry, sure. Anthony Danielle, 31 Monroe Avenue, Pittsford, 14534.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you to the board for considering this. It was our feeling, frankly, when we started this process, that outdoor storage was akin to the special use permit for a grocery store, since there are things like shopping carts and other, normal activities that you would consider to be part of a grocery store. And, having a pumpkin display before Halloween. We didn't really think it needed any variance at all, which is why it was never requested. But as this process has continued and the attacks have continued both to this board and to others, and which I'm sure will continue tonight. But we appreciate the patience of this board and the thoughtful contemplation, and hopefully this is a relatively simple decision and certainly not something that we would consider to be a big deal. But that's it. Thank you.
Okay, very good.
And this is Danielle. Just to reiterate real quick with Jerry, the reality is, like Jerry said briefly, Whole Foods doesn't intend to do this 12 months out of the year. It's a very seasonal thing, much like some of the other stores. I'm sure once the Wegmans funded opposition groups start their arguments, just keep in mind that it's just going to be seasonal. It's not a year-round display. That's all.
Okay.
I
Okay,
guess
very good.
The final factual comment I would just like to add, it wouldn't be Halloween without pumpkins on in front of the store. I think.
Okay.
So
All right.
thank you very much.
Okay, Jerry, very good. That was inspirational. That's good. Okay. All right. So questions from the board members for these fine gentlemen?
Yeah, this is member Primo, and I guess I'll address it to Jerry. But it might involve the Danielle too. First of all, thank you, Anthony, Danielle, for explaining why this wasn't part of the original incentive zoning request. That was helpful. Jerry, has there been any other area variances granted with respect to this project for other stores since it went through the incentive zoning process?
There have not as of yet, since we only have one operating tenant on site. We haven't really had a need at this point to make any other area variance applications here. But I will say, in the context of incentive zoning, we certainly have received area variances for other incentive zoning projects for later discovered needs. In particular, I was involved with Jewish Senior Life, and on the cottages, the large buildings that are in front of Jewish Senior Life, there were some additional refinements that were made to their plans after, before construction actually, but after the incentive zoning approval. And we did go through area variance processes, and this board granted area variances. I don't recall exactly what they were for. I think it dealt with the location of generators and the like. But again, this is not something which was addressed in the incentive zoning itself. If we were to look to vary from an incentive that was granted, there may be a different take on this, but this is totally separate from anything related to the incentive zoning. And the incentive zoning only deals with an exchange of incentives and amenities. So it doesn't preclude, and the code does not preclude, any ability to apply for variances from this board.
Yeah, as you said, I suspect that this may be tabled. Certainly to the extent there are examples of area variances being granted after incentive zoning, I would certainly be interested in seeing those. I haven't been on the board long enough to have been involved in one of those, so
Okay.
It might be very helpful to me personally.
Yeah, Rick should be able to pull it out. We certainly can research it and get that done as well. But those were done as part of the incentive zoning, I think was granted in 2011, 2015. So it wasn't that long ago.
Okay, very good.
Judy?
Yes, go ahead, Judy.
Okay. I see a difference between having flowered plants neatly displayed and pumpkins versus shopping carts around. I have never seen a supermarket with shopping carts just thrown around out in front. I have seen displays, which I think are fine, but you mentioned shopping carts. Is there not going to be an interior space for them to be stored rather than outside?
If, I can let Anthony or Danny, if they're unmuted, address it, but I can tell you, based on my experience in the Whole Foods Plaza, looking at the Whole Foods Plaza in Buffalo, their carts are stored all inside.
They are.
They have full inside storage areas inside their alcoves. So it's not intended for this to be, I don't believe it's intended to be a cart corral. So I think, Danny, do you have any additional comments?
Yeah, I mean, if I could add, the reason I made that that comment, Mrs. Schwartz, is because, you know, you often will have carts that are in like collector, I forgot what the technical term is, but out in the parking lot, you know, a parking spot that has where you return your carts. And then you're correct. At night, the carts are stored indoors, and that's where they will normally be stored.
Right,
But there are also collection areas outside.
right outside the store.
Not right outside the store, I would say in the parking lot.
Okay, because I did see them right up at the front. So it's good to know that it would be just more aesthetically pleasing outdoor seasonal displays. And as far as your benches are concerned, are these going to be like a park bench? Do you anticipate having benches and tables where people will be eating outside? What is the use of those benches primarily?
Yeah, typically a Whole Foods does have some outdoor seating areas where, Mr. Jones could be inside shopping and Mrs. Jones is sitting outside having a coffee and reading her book, or the kids are waiting outside or something like that. It is public access, so that's what those benches are for. It's just
so there will be eating outside then. Yes.
Yes, there is no restaurant, but people can get a sandwich inside and go outside and sit down and have a cup of coffee and eat a sandwich. That's correct.
And then there'll be containers for disposal of.
Yes. Garbage, typical trash receptacles that you would find outside of any store, right? Grocery store.
Right. At the same time, if someone wants to take their Starbucks and walk over there, they can do that as well. Or if someone is coming off the path and wants to sit down and use their water bottle or whatever, or grab food at either Starbucks or Whole Foods or any place else, if they have stuff in their backpack, if they want to take it out, they're welcome to do it. It is a public seating area.
And this is Danny, just to clarify, there is permanent cart storage indoors. Obviously, in the wintertime, they don't want to store anything outside. The only time there'll be a cart outside is if someone chooses not to bring it back to their car, but to the corral.
Okay, very good. All right, other questions by the board members, please? Okay. All right. Okay, if there are no other questions by the board members, then let me open up and see who would like to speak regarding this application. Please identify yourself. Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Charles Malcolm, representing Save Monroe Avenue. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Earlier today,
excuse me, Charles, can you just give us your address, please, for the record?
Sure, 140 Pearl Street, Buffalo, New York, 14202.
Okay, great. Go right ahead.
I'm with the law firm Hodgson Russ, and I represent Save Monroe Avenue. And as was mentioned by Mr. DeStefano, I submitted a letter that addressed the application, and I just asked that be included as part of the public hearing record. I'm just going to go through and highlight some of my main concerns, some of my clients' main concerns with this particular application that we've kind of established in this letter. And I think Member Primo kind of hit the nail on the head and honed in on kind of the threshold issue with respect to this application that the board needs to wrestle with, and I think mandates denial of the application, and that's the jurisdiction of the ZBA to consider the application. And quite frankly, the application was made to the wrong board. As Mr. Goldman noted, this project received an incentive zoning approval from the town board, which allowed significant deviations from the code, use deviations, setback deviations, all sorts of, in the form of incentives, deviations from the requirements of the code. Those were specified in the incentive zoning application, and in exchange for that, the developer was required to identify amenities. Now, we have challenged that approval in court on a number of grounds, including the fact that the amenities were inappropriate for the incentives that were granted. But having said that, what the developer is really seeking is to amend that approval. They want more incentives without modifying the amenities. So quite frankly, if they want to go and change the incentive calculation, they need to do that at the town board level, not short-circuiting the process in Chapter 209 by coming to the ZBA and trying to do an end run around the incentive zoning process that they themselves chose to utilize for this project. I would also note that if you look at Schedule E2 of the incentive zoning approval, there's a very specific condition that says, quote, "The food market, Whole Foods, shall not exceed 50,000 square feet." Well, this application seeks to expand the food market into the side yard, which is in excess of the 50,000 square feet. And quite simply, the ZBA does not have authority to override a condition that the town board placed on this project through the incentive zoning process. So if the developer wants to change the incentive zoning formula that the town board approved by getting more incentives, and if the developer wants to modify that condition of the incentive zoning approval by having more retail space than what was allowed by expanding the market into the side yard, they have to go to the town board and get the town board's approval to do that. With respect to seeker, I'm not exactly sure what they're trying to do here, because in the application materials, there's a short environmental assessment form that describes the action as only approval of outdoor display in front of the Whole Foods store. Now, it looks like they're trying to segment the seeker review from the remainder of the project and ask this board to issue a neg deck for some pallets in front of the store. That's improper for a number of reasons. Number one, as I mentioned, this board doesn't have any jurisdiction, so it's not an agency and can't make a seeker determination of any kind. But even if you assume, and just for argument's sake, that the board does have jurisdiction, the board would be an involved agency and would have to issue seeker findings before making any determination with respect to this project. With respect to the area variance factors, I think, quite frankly, the effort to satisfy those factors was a little light on facts and substance. You know, for the first time, I saw some proposed renderings of what this outdoor storage / display was going to look like. In the undesirable change factor, there was some conclusory language by Mr. Goldman that it's not going to have an impact, but there was really no explanation or examples. Tonight, there were some examples, but there was really no commitment on what these displays were going to look like, other than some pictures of other stores' displays. Now, there were some variations. Quite frankly, I thought the 7-Eleven display looked like a disaster. You know, having pallets of washer fluid on the sidewalk, I think that would be an undesirable change in the neighborhood. How is that going to affect the pedestrian access? Is there going to be room for pedestrians to be able to walk safely? What's the visibility going to be like, particularly with respect to from the roadways and the Auburn Trail? Those are things that we haven't had any information on with respect to the application. The factor of whether the objectives can be achieved through some other method. Well, I mentioned the other method is go to the town board and modify your incentive zoning approval, which is the required path. But also, there's no discussion of why the interior of the store is insufficient for these displays within the 50,000 square foot retail limitation that the town board set in the incentive zoning approval. On the substantial factor, you're talking about locating the outdoor storage display in a completely different location and then removing the fencing completely to make it entirely visible. That's a massive difference from what the code allows. So under any definition, that's substantial. And the developer admits it's self-created, and that this is something that should have been included in the incentive zoning approval or incentive zoning request in the first place. So these are just some of the issues that we have with this application. And for these reasons, we believe the application should be denied by the ZBA, and this application should be directed toward the town board. Thank you.
Okay. All right, and who else do we have that is interested in speaking regarding this application?
Hi there. This is Jacob Zoglin. May I be heard?
Yes, and your address, Jacob?
Yes, my office address is 300 State Street, Suite 502, Rochester, New York, 14614. I'm an attorney with the Zoglin Group, and I represent Brighton Grassroots. We submitted a letter as well regarding this application, and I just asked that that letter be included in the public record related to this matter. So as you guys know, this property involves the BF2 commercial district, but it also has significant overlap for the RLA low density residential. And so that's a big consideration in terms of how this is going to impact the neighborhood and the community. As you know, the developer is seeking not just outdoor display and storage in the side yard, but total relief from the requirement of having that 6-foot-high screening fence, which obviously is going to impact how that is seen by the neighboring community. This is particularly troubling because the developer expressly told the planning board when it was seeking site plan approval that it was not going to seek these permanent outdoor seating or display storage areas for this building. And we've now heard from the developer that they're apparently intending to use this area, not just for outdoor seating, but also to allow people to eat there. And that they're seeking this approval via, and they have not sought conditional use permit for, outdoor seating, to allow that type of use. Outdoor seating like that for food and eating is only available for legally established restaurants on the same parcel, which doesn't exist here and which hasn't been sought. So those are some preliminary things I wanted to mention. For outdoor dining facilities, the town code has a number of requirements that would also need to be addressed and that haven't even been sought here. Town code section 202-84 says that outdoor dining facilities shall only operate during the hours of operation of the associated restaurant, which doesn't exist here. Shall only be used for dining by seated patrons. Shall not be used for food or alcohol service. Must be located and configured to ensure safe and unhindered passage of pedestrians and their vehicles. And we've mentioned that this could obstruct the visibility for pedestrians and vehicles. And it may be required to have aesthetically pleasing barriers, such as this screening, to ensure safe and unhindered passage. So those are some preliminary things I wanted to address before I get into the area variance discussion. I won't duplicate the discussion that Mr. Malcolm covered regarding jurisdiction and seeker review, but we do incorporate those arguments as well. Leading into the area variance analysis, the applicant doesn't even really make any substantive effort to address the criteria for an area variance. which is that the benefit sought by the applicant needs to outweigh the detriment to the health, safety, welfare of the community. And in this case, it doesn't. The detriment to the health, safety, welfare of the community far outweighs the meager benefit sought here. And we can apply the 5-factor test established by state law to see just that. And it's pretty telling that in their application, the applicant really doesn't offer, I mean, other than maybe, 1 or 2 pictures that they submitted for the first time tonight, they offer no independent evidence to support the factors or the required showing, and instead rely on self-serving statements from the developers or their attorney. And those kind of conclusory statements are not the evidence or facts that would be required to support this. So going right on into the 5-factor analysis. First, the variance here will cause an undesirable change in the neighborhood and create a detriment to the neighbors. Traffic, internal circulation were huge issues during the incentive zoning process. But the incentive zoning process didn't include any consideration of this new use for which the variance is now sought, or how this new use would impact interior traffic circulation, parking, nearby residential community, or the Auburn Trail, which, as everyone knows, goes right across this property, or any of the other environmental impacts that we believe would be caused here. So this will cause an undesirable change in the neighborhood and detriment to the nearby properties by affecting exactly these unstudied issues and by creating a new outdoor storage and display, seating and dining area in a location that would not have otherwise had that, and that wouldn't have had the intensities associated with those types of uses. This is not just going to harm the commercial district, but also because it's going to be visible from the adjacent RLA district and the Auburn Trail, it's going to harm those neighborhoods and districts as well. It's also plainly going to be out of character with the neighborhood because these uses aren't permitted as of right in these neighborhoods. The outdoor display would also be the first such use on this property and create an unscreened display visible to the RLA district and the Auburn Trail. And I think it's pretty clear that having a first of its kind use in an area like this is clearly a change in the community character. Likewise, by having outdoor seating where they've admitted that they're inviting unauthorized outdoor dining and congregation is not just storage and displays. This is about having people eat there. And all of the refuse and animals that could attract, which could also interfere with pedestrian use and vehicular traffic. These weren't issues that were considered during the SEQR review, the incentive zoning review, or the site plan process. So, clearly there are going to be significant changes here. Also, the location of these uses so close to the traffic circulation is really uncommon in this community. I mean, most other outdoor dining areas have a lot more space separating where the people are going to be sitting and dining from internal traffic and the resulting exhaust and fumes that are created. And these new unconsidered issues are the reason that the ZBA would have to reopen the SEQR process, as Mr. Malcolm discussed. So, outdoor dining like this is, as we discussed, is really a new use that's going to change this area. And BGR and its members have firsthand knowledge of what is an undesirable change in this neighborhood, and they have firsthand knowledge of the existing community character and what would be a detriment to the nearby property owners, because these people live in this area. And as the people who live in this area, they have the most direct knowledge and experience of these facts, and the developer has simply not offered any comparable evidence, testimony, or knowledge by people similarly situated. So, I think it's pretty clear that they've not satisfied their burden on that factor. And so that weighs against granting the area variance. Second, the benefit sought by the applicant can clearly be achieved without a variance. what they're seeking is to have the displays visible and accessible to customers. There's no reason that displays have to be outdoors for them to be visible and accessible to customers. An indoor display right inside the entrance would obviously be visible and accessible to them. And there's, the rear yard could also achieve the benefit without requiring, this variance. And it's kind of a little surprising that they've asserted in their application that that they wouldn't be able to achieve the benefit if it were in the backyard, because the developer has in this exact property a Starbucks building that has outdoor seating in the backyard. So I don't see how they can really make the argument that that's not visible or accessible to the Starbucks customers. So clearly that factor also weighs against granting the variance. Third, the variance is quite substantial. The proposed variance here, as we can see on the map that's on everyone's screen, covers almost the entire side of the grocery store, which is a pretty large building. And so that's clearly a substantial variance. Also, the fact that they're putting this under an outdoor canopy and, putting out benches and stuff for people, they're inviting people to come there and sit and use it for outdoor dining. And as the developer admitted, that's their intention. They want people to eat there, which is a more intense use than was studied or approved by any of the boards that have looked at this to date, and raises new concerns, again, about the related traffic, parking, pedestrian safety, and internal circulation. It's also substantial because of how uncommon it is for Brighton businesses to have outdoor seatings in side yard, and how uncommon it is for grocery stores in Brighton. Neither the Top store nor Ours Market have outdoor dining in the side yard that's being proposed like this. And so by comparison, that is very substantial. And lastly, the proximity of those dining, this proposed dining area to the RLA district and the Auburn Trail is much more substantial, than it would be if it were just, in the middle of a commercial area. So I believe this demonstrates that it's substantial and that this factor also weighs against granting the variance. The fourth factor here, the adverse effect or impact on physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, also plainly weighs against granting the variance. Outdoor seating for dining so close to drive lanes and parking, it just unnecessarily increases risk, not just to drivers or pedestrians, or not just to diners, but also to the pedestrians and motorists, especially because they're trying to seek complete relief from the screening requirement. Without the required 6-foot-tall physical barrier to separate these uses, you're exposing the diners and the pedestrians not just to physical collision, but to internal conflict and exposure to unsafe exhaust and fumes. And to have that right next to an eating area, that's just, that clearly is a physical and environmental hazard that is really unnecessary. Also that they can just have it in their front yard or in their side yard near the entrance. It would also apparently, by expanding the size of the store, by having more space for the displays and outdoor seating and dining, would have to take space from somewhere else, right? So they're apparently reducing the drive space or the space for the curbside pickup and grocery loading. It's got to come from somewhere, which by eating into that space would further interfere with internal circulation. So, these were things that were looked at without this variance during the incentive zoning process and the site plan process. And now they're changing all the calculus and the considerations that the planning board and town board carefully, the things that they considered. So, that's another reason that these things need to go back to the boards that actually have jurisdiction, as Mr. Malcolm discussed. Finally, with respect to the adverse impacts, this is going to obviously have visual impacts, not just to to the nearby residential district, but also to everyone passing by the Auburn Trail. I mean, the comprehensive plan, wanted to promote, the use of the Auburn Trail for recreational purposes, wanted it to be, tranquil and have it be a peaceful area. I mean, the town is supposed to keep this in park-like conditions. So to have this kind of, not only is it now surrounded by this massive parking lot and grocery store, but now it's intended for outdoor storage and a dining area, really makes this an adverse visual impact, both from the Auburn Trail and for the nearby residential community. So I believe that also weighs against granting the area variance. And I'll wrap up with the last factor, which isn't very difficult to get your head around, which is that the developer and his attorney both admit that this difficulty is self-created. The developer knew the town code limits when they proposed this project. And frankly, anyone that has familiarity with the Whole Foods buildings knows that they would have wanted to do outdoor storage. So they probably knew that the Whole Foods store wanted this as well when they started this project, the incentive zoning project, and yet they still failed to seek this approval from the town board, which, the effect of that is, of course, that they're now seeking to modify the deal that they made with the town board without going through that process. It's effectively an end run around that. So in that way, the difficulty is self-created, and that factor again weighs against granting the variance. So in conclusion, the benefit sought is definitely, nothing compared to the harm to the health, safety, and welfare of the community. And so the area variance should be denied. Again, there's no jurisdiction here. The developer has not even sought all the approvals required for the anticipated use. They didn't satisfy the 5 factors. And for these reasons, we ask that this application be denied. If, however, the ZBA is inclined to go forward on this, we do believe that it must condition any approval on site plan modification and incentive zoning modification, essentially saying they have to go back to the appropriate boards and get approval from them, and they would have to reopen seeker and consider the adverse environmental impact. I know there was a lot to go through on this application. Thank you for taking the time to listen to Brighton grassroots concerns. I appreciate your time tonight, and thank you.
Okay, very good. Is there anyone else on the call that would like to speak regarding this application? Okay.
If I may, this is Danielle. I'll be less than 2 minutes.
Okay, Danny, let me just, Danny, can you
Mr.
hold?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask some questions.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine.
Charles and Jacob.
Well, yeah, okay, Ed, that's fine, but let me speak first here, please. Danny, just understand that, because I know you guys have adequate experience with this board, that, if I will allow you to add something, that's fine. But this is not going to be an interrogatory type discussion about the comments.
2 minutes of clarification.
Okay, I just want you to be clear about it. That I didn't know what you wanted to say, but I just want to not have to stop you or stop anybody else. So go right ahead, though. And then Ed, you can go.
For somehow we started talking about outdoor seating. This application is for outdoors display of pumpkins and mums and flowers. That's the extent of it. Whether they want to come back and get outdoor seating, that is not what we're asking for. That's up to the board. I had no idea that the requesting to put some pumpkins and mums outside a store was going to, affect the entire town of Brighton. Apparently, it's Armageddon. But the other piece I wanted to add in there, that the reason why stores put flowers and pumpkins outside the store and not inside is because it's a living thing. It's got flies, it's got bugs. There are health regulations that stipulate you should have that stuff outside. They try not to put it inside. They kept on saying there's no reason why you can't put it inside. That's one of the reasons that it goes out there, and just want to clarify that. Again, I apologize. If the board thinks that pumpkins is going to ruin the town of Brighton, by all means, use your judgment. I don't want to do bad things with the town.
Well, we'll gladly consider it all, as you know, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, so Ed, you had something?
Yeah, for Charles and Jacob, I guess, whoever wants to take this on, obviously saying that the zoning board of appeals has lost its authority given it to by town law, section 267B is a big deal. And in particular, given the situation where you have rezonings and the zoning board of appeals still has the authority after rezoning to grant a variance. Do you have any legal support for this idea that incentive zoning somehow different and that it deprives the board of the jurisdiction granted by the state legislature?
So the town code, chapter 209, sets forth the process for incentive zoning. So it's the developer chose to utilize incentive zoning for this particular project. So the zoning on this project and how this particular project is permitted and all the deviations that have been allowed for this project and the configuration that's been permitted and all the deviations from the impervious surfaces that are allowed, the use deviations. And I think we counted 53 specific deviations from the applicable code provisions. Those are permitted through incentive zoning. And then the town goes further and conditions the incentive zoning approval on the fact that the retail use, the Whole Foods market, shall not exceed 50,000 square feet. Doesn't say the building, the store, it says the market shall not exceed 50,000 square feet. So you have the developer choosing to utilize chapter 209. You have that process is totally in the town board realm. There is no role for the ZBA in chapter 209. This entire layout, everything that this project is allowed to do versus not allowed to do is through incentive zoning. And then when the town board approved it, they said the Whole Foods market's limited to 50,000 square feet. Now they're coming to you and they're saying, well, despite the fact that we told the town board what incentives we wanted and how we were going to configure this project, and we were going to only seek these incentives and that we were going to only provide this amenity, now we're going to ask you for more incentives, but we're not going to give a separate amenity, and we're going to want to violate the condition that the town board put on the incentive zoning approval. So when you combine the chapter 209 requirements, okay, and the fact that the developer chose to utilize that, they could have gone to you guys in the first place. They didn't have to go to the town board. They could have gone under town law 267B, gotten all the variances. And I know Danielle's back there laughing, but he knows it's true. They could have gone to the ZBA and gotten 53 variances for this project. But they didn't. They went to the town board and used chapter 209 and got incentive zoning, and the town board put that condition on there. And the ZBA doesn't have authority to relieve them from that requirement.
Okay,
So just so I understand what you're saying that somehow there's a provision in 209 that deprives the ZBA of jurisdiction?
Chapter 209, incentive zoning, is the process by which the developer chose to utilize, and there is no role in 209 for the ZBA. That's a town board approval. So when this project was approved, it was approved under incentive zoning. So that's the first argument. The second argument is that the town board, when it approved this particular application, put a condition on the incentive zoning approval that said that the Whole Foods market is limited to 50,000 square feet. Then they want to come to the ZBA to essentially override a condition that the town board put on the application. And so my point is, once you go incentive zoning under chapter 209 for a project approval, because you're approving the whole project under 209, there's no role for the ZBA in an incentive zoning project. You get the proper procedural path under 209 is to go back to the town board and amend your application. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is there's a condition on that approval that the town board set that says you can't have a retail use more than 50,000 square feet. And now they're asking you to spill out into the side yard with the retail use. So there's two separate bases as to why that's not permitted.
Okay,
Well, certainly, I'm not going to keep on arguing with you.
yeah, we really can't, Ed.
about this, although I'd be curious to see any legal precedent you may have on that point.
Okay, that's fair. And again, we really have to take the opportunity to.
And I'm not
deliberate.
arguing with you. I was raising questions. I just want to be clear.
Okay.
No, I appreciate the question. I know Mr. Goldman cites some past precedent of a prior zoning board of appeals that may have tried it. I'm happy to provide further briefing on this subject, in advance of further meetings. But I think it's pretty clear under Chapter 209 that if you look at it, there's no role for the ZBA. And we all know who chose to go incentive zoning.
Okay.
And the condition is a separate issue. It's not, it's a town board condition that limits what the developer can do. And so they're asking you essentially to overrule the town board. I mean,
We
what
are
kind of
not.
position
We
that,
are
I mean,
not.
think about what kind of a position.
Okay,
that
hold on,
the
hold on,
CBA is.
hold on.
Yeah,
Hold
I mean,
on.
it's becoming the
Gentlemen.
Charles Malcolm show. It's not
Okay,
appropriate.
gentlemen,
Hey,
gentlemen.
I was muted in my video.
50,000
as well.
was
I
the
asking
building
questions.
size.
Okay.
Has only to do with the building size, and the building is not
All right.
changing.
Does the condition say anything about a building, Danny? I don't think it does.
Yes,
Okay,
okay.
guys,
Stop it, Chuck.
all right, that's enough. Okay, I mean, I don't want to have to mute you guys. I mean, everyone understands what happens with these comments, and the board, has to take the opportunity to deliberate. You all have offered your opinions. That's what they are. And, that's our job to be able to ascertain what we believe to be the case or verify or whatever we would need to do. But we're not going to have a debate here. That's not an appropriate forum for it when we allow people to speak. So if somebody else on the call has something else to add that would like to speak, I'm happy to do that, but I'm not happy to entertain, a discussion where we're going back and forth trying to figure out who's right or wrong or whatnot. Okay, go ahead, Jerry. You're muted, Jerry.
I'm not going to engage in a debate with Chuck. Okay. I only to say that we strongly disagree with every single one of the positions that he has taken.
Okay.
We know and have a decision tonight because county planning has not come back. So to that extent, instead of having verbal haranguing back and forth, we would like to just state that we are going to respond in writing to this letter that we haven't seen yet, and the oral comments that we've received this evening. I don't want to extend this board's evening any further since we aren't going to get to a decision anyway.
Okay.
But I want to be on the record right now to say that we disagree with each and every point. that
Okay.
is-
Okay, that's fine.
And Jacob too.
Okay, all right. I appreciate that. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding this application? Okay, thank you very much. At this point, the public hearing is closed. Okay, let's move on.
Excuse me,
Rick?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
If we close the public hearing, I don't want to preclude our written response coming in. And I know that we will hear from other council that if the public hearing is closed, that further written submission cannot be considered. So I am asking either to allow this board to allow us to have a written submission to be included in the record or to hold the hearing open.
Okay, how about we'll discuss that in the deliberations as it relates to it. It's our general procedure when we finish the comments to close the public hearing at that point. We can decide to do otherwise if we, so choose, and you could hear that in the deliberations, okay? But I take your point, okay? All right, we're all set then, Rick, to move
Yes.
on?
Ken, do you have anything you want to offer or no?
No, I was just going to echo what Dennis just said, which is that I think when we take this project up to discuss as the board, we'll discuss what we'll do about. My guess is that Mr. Malcolm Mr. Zoglin and Mr. Goldman are all going to want to be able to submit additional papers. And so we need to discuss how we're going to make that happen. I suspect that those papers are going to be more in the nature of legal argument than they are going to be anything factual for the record per se. And so it may be okay to close the record with the understanding that we will be receiving legal arguments from counsel. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Agreed.
Yeah. Dennis, I think there's still one hand up.
No,
saw
I think
them.
I think we're done. I
You're
think we've
done?
gone
Okay.
far enough. Yeah.
Okay, all right,
Mr.
let's go,
Chairman.
Rick.
It's your call, Mr. Chairman, but I think we've heard everything that we need to hear.
Okay, yeah, we had, okay, the old businesses, right? doesn't-
No, I
Okay.
mean, we're done with the public hearing. So if you want to take a break,
Yes. Does anyone need 5 minutes?
yeah, why don't we take a 5-minute break?
5
Okay,
minutes sounds good.
very good. And you can keep an eye, Rick, to see when we get everybody back here. I didn't put my stopwatch on, so. What are we looking like, Rick?
I think we got everybody.
Okay.
Kathleen, you're there, right?
Yep, I'm joining right now. I was
Yeah.
just sitting down.
Okay, I think we have everybody.
Okay, well then, when you're ready, you can proceed, Rick.
Well, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Okay. Okay, we'll flip a quarter for it. All right. Okay, so we'll go through the agenda and then we go to the old business, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, all right. So I guess at this point, we'll start with applications 12A03 and 12A04, which are the property at 30 Jefferson Road. So Angie, I know you have one of these applications and Heather has the other. Do we want to, do we
Why
have?
don't we start with the use variance and?
Yes, yeah, that's fine. Okay. All right, so thoughts by the board members on the use variance?
I wrote up the I wrote up the an approval for this. I felt like this was they did demonstrate the lack of ability to have a reasonable economic return for the property based on the costs of renovations. And also just the fact that the property being the size that it is, the location that it is, and the size of the building itself, and the lack of a connection to sewer. I work in real estate. I don't see any kind of industrial or office use ever coming into this property and ever being used. It is clearly meant for some sort of an open concept retail store. I did confirm, that was why I asked Rick. My only concern was whether or not liquor store versus some kind of other open concept type retail store, if that was a expansion of a previous variance, for lack of a better term. And our code treats liquor stores the way that they treat all over other retail stores. So I'm convinced that they meet all the criteria and that this is a better use for this property than what it is currently.
Okay, other thoughts by the board members?
Technically, if I could just.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Let me just comment on what Andrea just said. Technically, there are a few retail uses that are allowed in the IG. So we don't treat all retail establishments the same. And I just want to make that point. So there are a few retail uses. The ones that come to mind are vaping retail. That certainly is allowed under the vaping law. I know that the town board is about to next week adopt the cannabis law, which is going to allow cannabis establishments in IG as retail as well. So just be aware of that.
Also, Ken, you might want to add adult uses as, for instance, an adult bookstore.
Right.
Where I is permitted in the IG zoning district.
Yep.
After listening to all of you, I think this is the best use.
Okay.
Well, and the thing of it is, I think truly, I mean, this has gone back for eons and eons. From what they're doing, I think this business will lend itself to really cleaning up the site. And I think it's really needed. So, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, any other comments by the rest of the board related to the use variance?
I'm for it.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree too. I mean, those of us who've been on the board a while know the history of this property. I mean, it looks, the investment here looks real, and, obviously cleaning up this location, not at the the guise of bringing in some type of a business that's going to be a detriment to the area, which I don't believe a liquor store would be, then I think, the applicant's ability to get some kind of return out of this property for carrying it for this many years, it seems reasonable. So, okay, Andrea, you want to
And
proceed
just,
on that?
Andrea and Heather, just so you guys think about this as your conditions, please remember that it does require site plan modification approval from the planning board. So you might
Okay.
want to add that.
And we need a seeker determination on this.
And we need seeker determination as part of your approvals.
Yes.
Okay.
And the last thing, just before they start, Dennis, I'm sorry. Is it possible for Brendan to take down the Whole Foods plan while we go through? Thank you.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so let's handle just 12A03 and then we'll speak with Heather a bit about 12A04. Go ahead, Andrea.
Quick question. Do we need to condition the use variance on site plan approval by the planning board? Because while I understand that certainly any kind of parking variance or bulk variance would need that condition, I'm wondering if saying, hey, look, however you can figure out how to put a liquor store on this site, we would be okay with it, even if it ends up being, different, I guess that's my thought. Obviously, to put anything on the site is going to require planning board approval, I would assume, just based on size, but does it really need to be a condition? I guess that's my question.
I don't think it hurts, and it kind of like the parking variance and the use variance go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, because there's no place really to park on that lot except for in a front yard. I do think it's important that the use variance, the only use variance that could be permitted that might not need a parking variance would be a gas station repair shop, which is an allowed use in the district. So I don't think there's any use variance that could go in there that wouldn't need some form of site plan modification and front yard parking. So I think it's certainly something that we should add to both the approvals
Okay,
as a condition.
got it. Okay.
All right, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I needed.
Yeah, I sent it over in the email to you yesterday, along with the statement. Got yesterday's email.
Yeah, let me grab it, sorry.
And as an attachment, the seeker statement.
You had one specifically for this one, right?
There is as attached to the information that
Right.
you received yesterday, there is a neg deck specific to this application.
Okay.
And there's the statement.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let me get both open. So I move that the board, having considered this information presented by the applicant and having conducted the required review pursuant to seeker with respect to application 12A-03-21, adopts the negative declaration prepared by town staff and determines that the proposed action will not likely have a significant environmental impact. I also move to approve application 12A-03-21 for a use variance, etc., all as described in the application and submissions on file based on the following findings of fact. Number one, under the applicable zoning regulations, the applicant has been deprived of a reasonable economic use or benefit from the property in question, which has been demonstrated by competent financial evidence. The property has been vacant since 2002 and was actively marketed from at least 2017 through 2020 and passively marketed from 2020 through the present by a realtor, with little interest and only one offer that did not survive attorney review. Interest in the property was almost exclusively for retail uses, which are generally not permitted in the zone. The high costs associated with renovating the property for an attractive permitted use would outweigh the market value of that renovated property and thus also be unable to produce a reasonable economic return. Number two, the need for a use variance here is unique to the applicant's property and does not apply to a substantial portion of the neighborhood and is not self-created, as it stems from the limited size and shape of the property, which is well under the minimum lot size and lot depth per code, as well as the very limited size of the building, which is not conducive to office or general industrial uses, but which would be conducive to an open floor plan, open floor retail use, such as the proposed liquor store. It is also due to its lack of public sewer hookups that limit its utility and attractiveness for uses permitted in the district. Number three, the requested use variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, as the property was previously used as a convenience store with gasoline sales, and thus a return to retail store is consistent with the neighborhood historically. Number four, the use variance requested is the minimum necessary to grant relief from the hardship, as there are no other uses more suitable for this site that would produce income and that would comply more closely with the zoning code or be more consistent with historical uses. In fact, this use variance represents a reduction from the variance previously granted at this site. Number five, there is no evidence that the health, safety, and welfare of the community will be affected by the granting of this variance. Conditions, number one, this approval is conditioned upon all approvals and necessary permits, including planning board approval.
Okay, do we have a second?
You
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Do you in any way want to be specific on the use itself in this approval, or do you feel that we're approving it per what they requested per the application as you stated?
Yeah, I mean, my findings of fact all refer to as a liquor store. So I think we could condition it if we want belt and suspenders, but I think that they presented it as a liquor store. We're approving it as a liquor store.
Yeah, typically we state that just so it's clear that if in the future if somebody pulls it out, they don't have to go back to the minutes and figure that out. But
Okay.
I'll leave it up to you.
So I'll do condition number one will be the use approved pursuant to this use variance shall be as a liquor store only. And number two, all necessary board approvals and permits shall be obtained, including without limitation planning board approval.
And I'll second Judy.
Okay.
Motion is to approve with conditions. Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. McKay Drury,
Yes.
Mr. Mites,
Yes.
Mr. Primo,
Yes.
Ms. Schwartz,
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins Wright.
Yes.
Motion to approve with conditions carried.
Okay. All right, so next we have the parking situation. Again, this is a long-standing issue again too. So what are people's thoughts on that? Heather, you have this one. Did you have specific thoughts?
I prepared it as an approval, which sounds consistent with how Member Wright had reviewed it as well. I didn't have any concerns, given that it seems necessary in order to have the liquor store there.
Okay, very good. Does anyone else have any other comments related to that?
I'm good.
I think that's right.
Okay, yeah, and there's a lot of other improvements to the site, obviously, on this drawing compared to what we see there today, so.
I
Okay,
was glad, Judy, you brought out that there's going to be some landscaping and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah, I did want to actually, during our discussion, talk about, should that be a condition?
Yes.
A separate condition?
Yeah, I think you can make it a general condition, because if it gets tweaked by the conservation board, planning board, I think we would be okay with that. As a board, I'm kind of speaking for you guys. I think we'd be okay with that. And the conservation board and planning board might have a little more expertise in maybe, what plant material should be used and maybe a little more green space here rather than there. So let them be able to tweak it, but I definitely think you need to add something that
Right,
additional.
but can't we say
plant-
something that, I don't know the right wording, but that it's good to see that there is landscaping planned to mitigate the front yard parking.
Yeah.
Well, that could be a finding. That would be a finding.
Oh, yeah.
And then we
okay.
condition it that they do something similar to as what was submitted.
Right, okay.
However, let the planning board and conservation board have the ability to modify that.
Yeah.
That's all.
Generally, Rick, generally how we've handled this, I think, is that we would say something in the effort of, effort shall be made to screen or to enhance or whatever we'd like to
No,
talk
no, I want
about.
to be more specific than that, Dennis, because they submitted that as part of the package. But I don't
Well, I
want to be,
understand.
I don't want to be so specific that we tie them into that
Right.
plan. That's all.
Right, because the plan does show landscaping, but I think the comment that was made in the discussion was, is there something additional? And the applicant suggested that they might consider something additional. That was what the comment was.
Well, the plan, actually, the plan shows more than just landscaping. It shows additional green space. It shows a
Right.
reduction of pavement.
Correct.
So I want to make sure that as part of this, that they're going to reduce the pavement like they said, they're going to add landscaping like they said, but I don't want to tie their hands that they can't be fluctuate that a little bit per planning board and conservation board. That's all.
Okay, yeah, and I think typically we never do that because we're not landscape designers or
No, but
selectors
sometimes we-
of materials or anything.
But sometimes we tie them into the site plan. So I don't want to tie them into the specific site plan.
All right, you may have to help a little on this.
I think Heather's probably got that.
All right, well, let's hear it and then we'll go from there. Okay, Heather, go right ahead.
All right. Okay, so with respect to application 12A0421, I move that the board, having considered the information presented by the applicant and having conducted the required review pursuant to SECRA, adopts the negative declaration prepared by town staff and determines that the proposed action will not likely have a significant environmental impact. I also move that we approve application 12A04-21 to allow a small amount of front yard parking where prohibited by code based on the following findings of fact. 1, the requested variance will not produce an undesirable change in character of the neighborhood. The property is a former site of a gas station. The variance is consistent with approvals previously granted, and the neighboring commercial properties that are visible on the site plans as submitted, which also do, some of them feature front yard parking. The plans also show screening through green space and landscaping that will encourage there to not be a change to the character of the neighborhood. The benefit sought cannot be achieved through other means than the variance. The property is located on a corner and thus has 2 fronts. Based on the size, configuration, and lack of a public sewer, it's virtually impossible to construct any building on the site of sufficient size to allow customer access, absent having the front parking. 3, the requested variance is not substantial. It's for a small amount of parking at a proposed retail store, specifically a liquor store, where customers will not be staying for long periods of time. 4, the variance requested is the minimum necessary to grant the relief for the difficulty faced, given the orientation of the current structures and the septic system, including the septic field in the rear of the building, which cannot have parking. The front parking is necessary. 5, the proposed variance will not have an adverse effect on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood. There's already an existing parking lot located in the front of the lot, and the plan entails actually removing some of the asphalt. The following conditions will apply. First, the variance only applies to the present application and testimony. It will not apply to additional structures considered in the future, not included in the present application. 2, this variance is subject to the applicant obtaining all necessary inspections, including site plan modification from the planning board approvals and seeker review. And 3, that some efforts will be made consistent with the plan with respect to general purposes of adding green space, reducing pavement, and providing for landscaping to create some barrier between the road and the visibility of the front yard parking.
And I just changed number 1 that we use, I think maybe instead of structures, additional parking. So if you could read that back where, and then instead of just saying structures, say possibly additional parking.
Okay, so just amending the first condition. The variance only applies to the present application and testimony. It will not apply to additional parking considered in the future and not included in the present application.
Thank you.
Okay, you got a second for this?
Second,
Thank you, Ed.
Motion is to approve with conditions. Mr. Mikes,
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins Wright,
Yes.
Ms. Schwartz,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mr. Primo.
Yeah.
Mr. K. Drury.
Yes.
Motion to approve with conditions, carries.
Okay, so we have 3 to do that relate to the same property on Town Line Road. That's 1A03, 4, and then 2A02. So we can talk about them, but we'll obviously have to deal with them on an individual basis as far as the action. So the first one, relates, to the front setbacks. Again, this project materially was represented, and I think Rick, when staff reviewed again, there were no material changes, correct?
That is correct. It's the
Okay.
same plan.
Yeah, so basically, this is something that we had attacked before, and, the front setback issues are all along Brighton Henry Town Line Road in that area, so. Judy, it's yours. Do you have thoughts about it?
I am not in favor of it. I'm really not. It's just such a environmentally sensitive area, and I just think they're gonna make matters worse. I have a problem with saying it's not, economically feasible. There is a way to do it, and I think that we need to start thinking about the welfare of our community, and especially that area. Town Line is very sensitive. And they can put a 2-story in. They may not want to, but I will not approve. I would deny a 1-story as it is. To me, it's a very substantial variance. Okay, it should be 75 feet and they only want 42. I can't see it.
Okay, well, let's go around the room on this one then. Okay, Ed, what do you think about it, please?
yeah, oh, go ahead.
Oh, can you,
Yeah,
let's go on. Did you have a question or are
Yeah,
you?
it's just a question because kind of Rick, because typically when we are granting an extension or something like that to an approval, you'll actually give us copies of our approvals from a previous one. I understand that this is a brand new approval because too much time has passed, but
Correct.
is there a possibility to email us now a copy of the approval from the last version? Because these are all repeats. We've discussed this and voted on this and decided on, not that we have to do the same decision, but I think it would be helpful to see what we said about it and voted last time.
Yeah, kind of a funny story, Andrea. When I went to look for that, because I was going to send it all out to you guys, I went back to look specifically for the EPOD encroachment decision, and for some reason that entire decision was left out of the minutes. Although I know we approved it.
Yeah, I remember it.
Right, but for some reason I couldn't find it in the minutes. It was back in 2019.
Well,
so I think we just need to recreate if we are going to approve it, just recreate the approval process.
Yep.
And
Okay.
they are
Well, it's always.
I think it is relevant to our considerations Because to the extent we have granted prior variances and approvals, you really should extend them unless you can point to a change in conditions. And
I don't disagree with that, Ed.
yeah, so I'm particularly interested in what we did before.
We approved everything, we gave everything, extensions. And then the extensions lapsed. So that's why they're back under basically brand new applications. So you're correct, and if this board had approved these variances in the past, unless something drastic has happened to the area for whatever reason, I think it's difficult for us now to say, no, you don't get the variances.
Yeah.
I don't see enough changing out there to preclude the variances being granted. Now, again, that doesn't mean that a member back 2-3 years ago may have not approved it then. And that's their right to continue to feel that there is something that is not, but there's something that can be done to lessen their impact.
Well, based upon that history and my understanding, and even having driven by the site, I would tend to approve all these variances.
Okay. Very good. All right. Heather?
The concerns sound to be primarily environmental. What approvals were already granted, and will those be redone now?
What go ahead. Maybe I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, I'm not sure the question, Heather. So the 3 applications that we're hearing tonight from them, they were all approved in 2019.
Previously.
And then extended in 2020. And then I fell away after that.
Right.
We already have a negative declaration seeker review.
The seeker review was done back in 2019, both from the planning board and this board. And basically given a negative declaration, which you guys have that in your packet. So I think they've mitigated the encroachment into the EPOD. I mean, that's basically what we're here to discuss. Did they mitigate it enough for us to feel that, one, it's not an environment, there's a negative declaration that we can issue, and 2, it's not creating a substantial variance into that encroachment aspect.
And the reason I did what I did is because I did not like it the first time around. So
Okay,
I have to
that's
like it
fine.
the second time around, so
Okay.
just to let you know.
All right. Okay. Heather, did you have other comments about this?
No, I mean, I'm inclined to believe that if we've granted it in the past, unless something has changed, we should continue that.
Okay. Very good. Okay, Kathleen?
Well, I understand Judy's concerns, and they give me pause. I think for the reasons Heather just stated, we have to go with what we did in the past without someone being able to identify a significant change, or really any change.
Okay. Very good. Andrea?
I remember this application and I was a yes then. I think it was the application. I think we spent more time talking about it the last 2 years ago, but I think it's a good project for this location. And I think that they've mitigated the potential negative effects of it as best as they can in order to make use of the property.
Okay, very good. I agree. Okay, so I guess, Judy, you really do not favor 1A03. So would someone else be willing to present this one? Or I guess we can work together. Andrea, would you be willing to help with this?
Always me, always me.
Yeah. Well, you got to use that.
Because you're great on your feet, Andrea, that's why.
and all that extensive education you have. Okay. So,
I want to, I want to make sure, I want to look at something real quick and see if I actually have, just to see if I wrote the application last time.
oh, I don't remember. I remember the exhaustive discussion about it, but I don't remember who did it. No.
Oh, shoot. Now my
Fingers crossed.
Well, this is the setback, so this one isn't too bad. We're doing 1A03, so.
Yeah, sorry, my computer just froze. I tried to run a word search for,
Oh.
and
Wow.
now my computer is frozen. I'll wing it a little bit.
Okay, we can help.
So I moved to approve. Oh, I need a seeker. Sorry. Let me. Oh, I'm gonna have to find it again.
Question, does the whole motion have to be stated by one member?
For the record, I mean, anybody can chime in. We always work together on these other stuff. It's fine.
Because I could read that if Andrea's having computer.
Oh, yeah, just for speed, sure, go right ahead.
Okay, so to get it started with respect to application 1A03-22, I move that the board, having considered the information presented by the applicant and having conducted the required review pursuant to SECRA, not adopts the negative declaration prepared by town staff and determines that the proposed action will not likely have a significant environmental impact.
Okay, and then stop. Andrea.
Actually, hold on. Since we have two members making motions here, let's just vote on Heather's motion that you just made.
Okay, we can do it that way if you want. That's fine.
I
Need a
second.
sec. Thank you.
The motion is to adopt negative declaration for 1A03-22. Mr. Primo,
Yes.
Ms. Schwartz,
No.
Ms. Tompkins Wright,
Yes.
Mr. Mites,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. McKay Drury.
Yes.
Motion to adopt seeker carries. Negative declaration carries. Sorry.
Now Andrea can proceed with the main motion. If she wasn't muted, it would be.
I'm muted.
Okay,
I move to approve application 1A-03-22, et cetera, based on the following findings of fact. Number one, the granting of the requested variance will not produce an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or be a detriment to nearby properties. The existing property is zoned technology office park. And thus the removal of the current home, single family home and construction of a new 10,000 square foot office building and associated parking will not appear out of place in the neighborhood. The front setback no, okay, period. Is that okay? Okay. All right, number two, the requested variance is not substantial in light of the fact that all other available alternatives for placement of the building would create a significantly smaller setback and be a more substantial, or I should say, would be a more substantial setback on the property. Number three, the benefit sought by the applicant cannot reasonably be achieved by any other method without a variance. The applicant demonstrated previously, as well as through current testimony, a series of plans submitted to the town for consideration that would meet the applicant's needs. However, none of which would have provided more mitigation of setback variance or be more aesthetically pleasing or appropriate for the site. Number 4, there is no evidence that the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. The variance granted herein applies only to the building described in the location as depicted on the application and in the testimony given. Number 2, all necessary permits must be obtained.
I had number 2 and I can help you out with the conditions because I did find the
Oh,
approval
good.
letter.
Okay.
But number 2, all necessary planning board approvals shall be obtained. Basically, the first one was what we had the last time, and 2, all necessary planning board approvals. We have a second?
Second.
Okay,
The motion is to approve with conditions. Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. McKay Drury,
Yes.
Ms. Schwartz,
No.
Mr. Green, I'm sorry, Mr. Mikes,
yes,
Mr. Primo,
Yes.
and Ms. Tompkins Wright.
Yes.
Motion to approve with conditions carries.
okay, so the next one is the EPOD, which is 1A04. Any thoughts about that? Again, this was approved previously. Thoughts, concerns?
I think it's the same issue with previously approved, so let's go.
Okay, very good. Okay, I have this, so let's do the seeker, right, Rick, first?
Please.
Okay. Okay,
Well, since it's for the neg deck for the same project, doesn't the neg deck cover all these?
Yeah, I think it would. And maybe we just make the statement that the neg deck as adopted in 1A03. I don't know, just.
okay, that's
just to
fine. I
clarify.
think, is that okay, Ken?
So if my recollection serves me well, I think that each of the neg decks referred specifically to the applications. I mean, to answer
One
Ed's
neg-
question that he's not asking, couldn't we have done all 3 of these applications under one? Well, sure. Could have, but we didn't get them. Wait,
Okay.
so they each have a separate number. So
I was
let's
just trying to save.
let's just
Dennis's
make the
voice,
record.
sorry.
Nope. Let's make it happen with the neg deck on this one.
Okay, then. We can make that so. That'll probably be one of the easier things we do. Okay. So on 1A0422, I move that the board be, having considered the information presented by the applicant and having conducted the required review pursuant to seeker, adopts the negative declaration prepared by town staff and determines that the proposed action will not likely have a significant environmental impact. And I also move that we approve application 1A0422 based on the following findings of fact. 1, the approval of this variance will not present a negative change in the character of the neighborhood or subject area, since the project will enhance landscaping and restoration of the buffer area. 2, no other alternative designs will meet the objectives of the applicant to use the property for the intended purpose. And 3, the variance requested is the minimum necessary to meet the needs of the applicant and will cause no negative impact to neighboring similar properties. Conditions: 1, it's based on the testimony given and plans submitted. And 2, Rick, on the approvals, what do we got to have here?
The first one was right, and number 2 was all necessary planning board approval shall be obtained.
Okay, great. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Thank you.
The motion is to approve with conditions. Mr. Primo,
Yes.
Ms. Schwartz,
No,
Ms. McKay Drury,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins Wright,
Yes.
and Mr. Mites.
Yes.
Motion to approve with conditions carries.
Okay, next we've got Bonnie Bray. We got additional.
While we're
info-
on this, let's go to 2A.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. I forgot. I had put them all together. Yeah, so the last one related to 3,300 is the front yard parking.
I have that one.
Yep. Is there any concerns there by any of the board members?
No, not for me.
Anyone else?
No.
Yeah, I'm good with it too. Okay, Heather, please.
Okay. With respect to application 2A0222, I move that the board, having considered the information presented by the applicant and having conducted the required review pursuant to SECRA, adopts the negative declaration prepared by town staff and determines that the proposed action will not likely have a significant environmental impact. I also move that we approve application 2A0222 to allow front yard parking where prohibited by code based on the following findings of fact. 1, the proposed variance will not create a substantial change to the neighborhood or subject area. The area is commercial and industrial in nature. The location of the parking is similar to other uses in the area, including multiple lots across Brighton Henrietta Town Line Road. And the plan will enhance the landscaping buffer between the parking and the road. The difficulty necessitating the variance can't be solved in another manner not involving the variances. Moving the parking further north to avoid a front setback would result in the need for rear and side setbacks, but parking within the floodplain and floodway limits. The requested 3, the requested variance is not substantial. It is for 67 parking spaces in total, not all of them located directly in front along Brighton Henrietta Town Line Road. And the variance request is the minimum necessary to grant relief from the difficulty. Other alternative plans would require other variances and impact the pre-existing environmental features on the site. 5, the proposed variance is consistent with surrounding properties so as to not have an adverse effect on the physical or environmental conditions of the neighborhood. Again, front parking is part of the plan that most limits the impact on the environmental areas on the site. And 6, though not strictly required, the difficulty which leads to this variance was not self-created, as the environmental features are pre-existing.
Heather, can I suggest some conditions for you?
Yes, you may.
I suggest number 1, the variance applies only to the parking lot layout as shown on plan submitted and for testimony given. And I suggest application number 2, all necessary planning board approvals shall be obtained.
Okay,
Do you accept my suggestions?
I do accept that. I also would like input with respect to a landscaping or green space condition.
How do you want to word that?
I think that a general condition similar to the other front parking one could be helpful, where we're not expressly limiting them to exactly what's in the plan, but that there be some kind of buffer. So that's what I would propose to do.
I think I need a little something more specific, so it will reflect in the record of exactly how we're proposing that condition.
So are we, what we're discussing is the mitigation of landscaping for the front parking setback? But you want something, Rick, more specific as to location?
No, I think I want,
This is kind of like what we were talking about the other one a little bit.
Well, the other one was a little more specific because it hadn't
Yeah.
gone to planning board yet and this has already gone through preliminary planning board approval.
Yeah,
And going back for final. Or actually, they're just going back after they were tabled from the planning board. I don't think we need it here, Heather, to be
Right.
honest with you. I don't think in this case, the plan is the plan that you're seeing. The planning board's already seen that plan. They haven't seen the 30 Jefferson Road one yet.
right. Okay, there's a difference.
There's
Yeah,
a little bit of a
I
difference.
understand the distinction. Okay, so I would propose the following two conditions to apply. One, the variance only applies to the present parking lot layout as submitted in the current application and testimony. It will not apply to additional parking considered in the future. And two, all necessary planning board approvals must be obtained.
A second?
Second, please.
I'll second. Member
Andrea?
Wright.
Motion is to approve with conditions. Mr. Primo,
Yes.
Mr. Mites,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. Schwartz,
No,
Ms. Tompkins Wright,
Yes.
Ms. McKay Drury.
Yes.
The motion to approve with conditions carries.
Okay, so now we move over to Bonnie Bray. Again, some additional information submitted.
Yeah.
Ed, your thoughts?
Yeah, this is mine, Dennis. Last time I was, I guess, wanted more information. I've been satisfied personally by what was given. I thought it was quite comprehensive. I thought the comments from the architect was extremely helpful, and I would suggest that we approve the variance.
Okay. Does anyone else have any concerns from either the last discussion or this one tonight? I agree. I personally agree with Ed that we certainly cleared up. Getting the data was certainly helpful. Okay. Any other thoughts by anyone else related to this?
Okay, I move that we approve application 1A05-22 to allow livable floor area of 3,415 square feet, 390.2 square feet over the maximum provided by code of 3,024.8 feet based on the following findings of fact. One, the requested area variance is for a single family use and is a type 2 action pursuant to 6 NYCRR section sign 617.5 open paren C close paren open paren 17 close paren, and no further action is required pursuant to seeker. 2, the requested area variance is the minimum variance necessary to address the benefit sought by the applicant. The applicant wishes to expand the livable floor area to allow living area for the applicant's mother and to allow better configuration for the garage. The applicant's architect has submitted information establishing that the extra 390.2 square feet of floor area is necessary to meet these goals. 3, no other alternatives can alleviate the difficulty and produce the desired result. The applicant has submitted testimony that her effort to purchase a larger home in the area have been unsuccessful. That should be her efforts. 4, there will be no unacceptable change in the character of the neighborhood and no substantial detriment to nearby properties. The applicant has submitted substantial information that the proposed size of the home, the lot coverage, and the requested variance are in line with the existing conditions of many properties in the area. 5, while the overall increase in livable area is large, the requested variance is not substantial. The requested variance is for 390.2 square feet, or approximately 13% over code, and is similar to other properties in the area. 6, while the need for the variance may be self-created, the applicant has shown she considered other options which did not work. To the extent the variance need is self-created, it does not prevent the granting of the variance. 7, the health, safety, and welfare of the community will not be adversely affected by the approval of the variance. 8, the public record will include all submissions herein, including the letter from applicant's architect, Patrick J. Morbido, and the applicant's additional 37-page submission on the 20 largest houses in the area, and the email of Marin Caraban dated January 29, 2022. The following conditions will apply. 1, the variance is based on the application submitted, including various drawings, plans, and testimony, and only authorizes the project described therein. 2, subject to all necessary building department permits and inspections. 3, that the additional living space shall remain connected to the whole house, that the expanded house constitutes a single family unit and no separate living unit will be established.
Okay.
Second.
Can, in number 2, can you add all necessary architecture review board approvals also?
Is there going to be one? Because it doesn't
Yes.
involve the front, right?
Well, you can see it from the road
Okay.
because of the angle
Subject
of the
to
garage.
all necessary building department permits and inspection and approval by the architectural review board.
Thank you.
Now I'll second.
Hey, Heather.
Motion is to approve with conditions. Mr. Mikes,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt, or excuse me, Ms. Schwartz,
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins Wright,
Yes.
Ms. McKay Drury,
Yes.
Mr. Primo.
Yes.
Motion to approve with conditions carries.
Okay, next we have the signage changes on the Beam Mac building over on West Henrietta Road. Does anyone have any? Let's see, it's Kathleen. I think it's your application. What are your thoughts, Kathleen?
I did not have a problem with it.
Okay. All right, does anyone have any concerns about it? And it's clearly a big improvement. So we ought to thank them for their help. Okay. All right,
Okay.
go. And I don't, Rick, do you have some thoughts about, the issue of the multiple signs? I mean,
Well, I think that we need, and I think whoever's got this one realizes that we condition it just upon the signs that were
proposed,
shown in this application.
Yeah.
No additional signs in the future. All necessary architect review board and planning board approvals need to be obtained. You might want to, I know they talked about square footage in there. You might want to limit the square footage, total square footage allowed.
yeah. We don't have the calculation, so if we were, so what you're suggesting, if we were limited to the signs that were proposed and depicted or whatever, then is that going to be good enough for you?
Yeah,
That if
that's going to be good enough. And I think
Okay.
also square footage is shown in application on some plans or
Okay.
something like that. You don't need to be specific with the square footage. If I thought it was shown somewhere on the drawings, but maybe not.
Okay. Okay, Kathleen, are you comfortable with all that, or?
Hopefully I was a fast scrivener taking down some additional notes. So
Okay,
I think this needs the seeker negative declaration statement.
It does.
So I move that the board, having considered the information presented by the applicant and having conducted the required review pursuant to SECRA, adopts the negative declaration prepared by town staff and determines that the proposed action will not likely have a significant environmental impact. I also move to approve application 1A-06-22 based on the following findings of fact. 1, the variance request is to allow for the installation of non-business identification signs on 2 buildings frontage where not allowed by the code. 2, the variance results from the applicant redoing their signage to eliminate many existing signs for a total net reduction of 220 feet of signage. The elimination, I should say 3, the elimination of some of the existing signage will clean up the appearance of the front of the 2 buildings and will be an overall improvement to the look of those buildings. 4, while some of the proposed signs are non-business, they relate to the business operation and will assist the public in identifying the proper entry points for sales and service. 5, the buildings are in a commercial area on a main thoroughfare. 6, granting of this variance will not produce an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or be a detriment to nearby properties. 7, there's no evidence that there will be a negative impact on the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood.
Kathleen, can you
Conditions?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Kathleen, just 1 second. On number 6, where you say it's not a change in the character of the neighborhood, you may actually want to add that there are similar variances granted for this, vehicle sales in the area, something like that, because we did grant additional variances.
Okay, the granting this variance, number 6, the granting of this variance will not produce an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood in that there are similar variance requests granted regarding signage to nearby properties
For vehicle sales.
for vehicle sales. And number 7 would remain the same.
Thank you.
Thank you. Conditions, the variances will apply only to that which is described in the application and testimony provided and limited to the signs in the application itself and will not apply to future projects. 2, applicant must obtain the architectural review board and the planning board approvals. And was there a 3rd condition, Rick?
No, I think you kind of, you
I did a
grouped them all
combo
in
in the
number 1, so I think you're all right with that.
Okay,
Second.
Get a second, yeah.
Other? The motion is to approve with conditions. Ms. Schwartz,
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins Wright,
Yes.
Mr. Primo,
Yes.
Mr. Mites,
Yes,
Mr. K. Drury,
Yes.
and Ms. Schmidt.
yes,
Kathleen?
yes.
Thank you. Motion
Okay.
to approve with conditions carries.
okay. So next we're going to Whole Foods on the outdoor storage and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
Dennis, can I just say something before we
Yeah,
get started?
please.
Mhm.
In consultation with the town attorney, in light of my employment with the New York State Attorney General's office, and out of an abundance of caution, I'm going to recuse myself from these applications.
Okay, that's,
Thank you.
that's probably wise. Okay, thank you. Okay, so just to open here and then we can chit chat about it here. Obviously, we received those additional materials at the 11th hour tonight, and obviously we heard all the discussion back and forth. So there's a lot of material to absorb here. So why don't we go around and at least get general thoughts, on this, Andrea?
If I, actually, Dennis,
Go ahead.
if
Go
I
ahead.
could start.
Yes, go ahead, Ken.
So I also read through the letters submitted by SMA and BGR for the first time today, just like all of you did. And I would like an opportunity to have some time to do some research and give some serious consideration to the arguments they raised.
Agreed.
Can you
Agreed. And
close?
Ken
I'm going to
also,
suggest, I do believe that Mr. Goldman, yeah, go ahead.
You're freezing up, Ken, that's all.
Yeah,
All right, I'm sorry. I also understand that Mr. Goldman and Mr. Zoglin and Mr. Malcolm all likely want an opportunity to submit legal arguments. I'd like to give them the opportunity to do that. I think the mechanism to do that is to close the public hearing and allow counsel to submit legal memorandum to the board secretary by a fixed date. I would suggest 2 weeks from today, February 16th, to give them time to submit it and then give us all time to see them, review them, think about them, and
Can I throw out rather than close, only because I'm curious to what the other board might say, and based on that, I might have some questions.
What do you mean the other board might say?
I thought, and again, I'm not feeling 100%.
I know,
especially-
Kathleen.
But,
Kathleen,
but there was
Kathleen, you're right.
in the
You're right,
letter,
Kathleen.
pardon?
You're right. It does need planning board approval.
It
Right.
does, yes.
So I wanted to, there was seemed to be in the letter that was written that I, again, I just saw it this afternoon, but I thought it said that there was testimony provided that was contrary, and there was some discussion regarding what the planning board would be doing. And that seemed to me that it might raise questions from us based on what they find.
So they have not yet presented to the planning board. They will be presenting to the planning board. We do not need to keep the hearing open to be on notice, administrative notice of what the hearing board finds and determines. And the other thought is, if this board decides that it does want to ask more questions or take more testimony, we can vote to reopen the public hearing. What I don't want to do is give the impression that we're not fully satisfied with the factual information. That's really the purpose of the public hearing that's been presented. The applicant has presented their facts. The opponents have presented facts, but really mostly legal argument. I think we're really down at this point in time to legal issues. That's why I suggest the submission of legal memorandum. And I think it would be most efficient to close the public hearing now and allow them to submit legal memorandum.
Well,
Let
Ken, I guess.
may I ask a question though, because I do have a factual question.
Yeah.
And that was, I was curious whether this seating is seating that would allow a parent with a child sit on a bench outside a store and eat a cookie
Yes.
type seating. Or as Mr. Danielle said, I believe he said someone is going to grab a cup of coffee from the store and maybe sit down because they're tired of their wife shopping or husband shopping inside. Or perhaps an elderly person who's worn out from walking across the parking lot and then sitting down type seating, which is pretty common outside of most stores. Or having cafe tables outside of what you would think of as a food establishment. And I don't think that that was fully answered on what type of seating. And I thought it was perhaps it was going to be answered in some other paperwork that was going to be submitted.
Well, can I just say, Kathleen, that our outdoor dining is specific to restaurants. There's no restaurant associated with the Whole Foods. Therefore, it's not outdoor dining. It's
Okay.
seating. So,
And Rick, there's no application to request approval for outdoor dining here.
correct.
So it was really this is just me as attorney, in my opinion. It was really just a straw man that was being set up to get knocked down. There is no application for outdoor dining that is part of this variance application before this board. It doesn't exist.
I wanted to make sure, because what I did not want to happen was someone to say that the board was somehow, this should be approved, that we were somehow deceived, or we didn't understand that there would be these benches and these benches would allow people to sit, and on these benches, people might get a sandwich or a cup of coffee.
They could buy food down at Wegmans and drive down the block and sit in front of Whole Foods on a bench and eat it. They could smoke a joint You know, I
Ken,
mean,
whoa.
no, it's true. It's
I know, I'm
true.
just joking. I'm just joking.
I mean, there's
just
lots
wanna-
of, they could
Okay.
take a nap. I mean,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah,
want to make
think-
sure that the records kind of, it's more clear that we understood that what kind of chairs they were, and that was all right to us, or we understood the kind of the
Yeah.
chairs that they were going to be there, or seating that would be available, and we didn't like it and said that we rejected it. That's all I was trying to make sure that
Yeah.
we were all on the same
Right.
page.
I think the testimony, the way it went, you know, the applicant was asked a direct question, could somebody sit there and eat something? And I think they answered it honestly, just like Ken is suggesting that in any bench anywhere in Brighton, someone could sit down and eat something. So I think that's, you know, drastically different than saying there's going to be permanent outdoor seating and arrangements made. And I didn't hear anybody asking for that. I don't think it was asserted. So
I thought it was a wonderfully honest answer that
Yes,
Danielle
I agree.
gave. I mean, they could have said, well, no, it's not intended for
That's
eating
right.
at all.
No,
But it was a wonderfully honest answer. Of course, somebody could sit there and eat, you know. They
See?
could,
That's
you know,
why
sit
we
there and
say,
whistle Dixie too, you know.
yeah. That's why we say no good deed gets unpunished, right? Okay.
Well, I had raised it because it was in the letter that said that there was a section related to seating. And I honestly, I think as a parent, I always enjoyed when there was a bench offered to me because I frequently had to sit outside with one of them. So I'm not opposed to seating. I just wanted to make sure we're okay with that.
Okay.
Not an outdoor dining application.
Okay, I think we got it.
Um,
All right, so
can I-
Ken is asserting
Yeah,
that.
I have a question too, after Andrea.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I fully agree not wanting to open this up to be another back and forth again at a public hearing. The one caveat to that is that I did think that the factors presented by the applicant were rather lighter than I would have anticipated them being, more conclusory than I would have anticipated them being. And I don't think it would be inappropriate. In fact, I would think it's appropriate for us to accept some additional factual support about the size of these outdoor displays and their a little bit clearer definition of what they contain and where they are. Because I don't think their presentation was as much as I would have wanted to approve something that was this contentious and as an application. So there are factual things that I feel like I would still like to see some more support for and see some more. I can appreciate that most of what I'm looking for are response letters and a legal analysis to understand what we're really dealing with here.
Okay.
I guess along the same lines about what might be factual or not is, as I said at the meeting, I am interested to know about other incentive zoning projects and other variances we've granted for those, like, did St. John's Meadows have an area variance after it was built? Did the Jewish home? I mean, you know, and I don't know if that's factual information or that's legal information.
It's factual information, Ed, in regards especially to the Jewish home, because that was the most common.
Yeah.
We granted generator location,
Maintenance building.
size and height of accessory structures, fence heights, fence locations. And our town staff and is under the impression that if a variance request has nothing to do with one of the incentives that the applicant applied for, then the zoning board can act on it. If it was if they came in for a variance specific to an incentive, we would not act on it. We'd say, no, that was an incentive zoning approval by the town board. You got to go back to the town board regarding that particular setback or square footage or something like that. But if it's outside of the scope of the incentives of the incentive zoning approval, we could act as a zoning board to approve or deny variance requested.
Yeah, and let me just, you know, step on those coattails, Rick, because, I mean, it struck me as I was listening to the argument, that the argument that Mr. Malcolm and Mr. Zoglin seem to be presenting is once a project is improved for incentive zoning, it no longer qualifies in any way for any variance for what, the life of the project? I mean,
Yeah, that
20
seemed to be their
years,
argument.
20 years from now, you know, something, you know, changes and they want to come in for a variance. Well, sorry, it was an incentive zoning. You got to go back to the town board. And I just can't imagine that is the scheme that the state legislature had in mind in passing the incentive zoning laws. And more to the point, I'm very interested, and I know Mr. Goldman and Mr. Zoglin and Mr. Malcolm are listening in. I'm very interested in seeing what case law they can come up with or statutory reference they can come up with to establish that the power of the zoning board to grant variances is somehow prohibited or eliminated upon the issuance of an incentive zoning application. Ed, you were driving at that point, I think, in your questioning, but that's, you know, if the statute doesn't prohibit it and both of these powers exist statutorily, it doesn't seem sensible that the zoning board would somehow say, well, we no longer have that power, so sorry. But if there's something out there, gentlemen, I would be very much interested. And just, I'm hearing that the board wants to keep the public hearing open and allow for submission, and that's fine. That's why, you know, you guys get to make the decisions. I just make recommendations. But I will say to Mr. Malcolm, Mr. Zoglin, and Mr. Goldman, if you're going to get me a legal memorandum, please get it to me by the 16th of February so I have time to read it, do my own research, do my own evaluation, and come into the March meeting with, you know, a good recommendation for this board, because that'll be very helpful.
Okay, well, we got to fashion all that together, so,
Right.
okay, all right,
Yeah.
so I guess,
Dennis, it's Judy. I also don't know, if there really, to me, wasn't clarification. I don't know how the others feel, but to me, there's a big difference between pallets and storing stuff out there versus a nice, you know, arrangement of flowering pots or even pumpkins.
Right.
So, I mean, pallets can sit out there for months on
Yeah.
end and whatever. So I don't know, you know, what they really meant by storage.
okay,
Yeah, and I think, Kathleen, I can't remember, when somebody was driving towards that point, that give us a little more, I think Andrea was saying it, that give us a little more idea of what this is going to encompass. I mean, I think it really did them a lot of harm by showing 7-Eleven. I'll tell you right now, 7-Eleven doesn't have any approvals. You know, they do a lot of things they shouldn't be doing. So
Okay.
that did them a disservice, unfortunately.
yeah, okay. But, you know, obviously we can give them the opportunity for clarity. That's what we do when we act on applications all the time. So, but I guess the question before we move forward is on the public hearing, because I think that's where the debate is going back and forth about what are reasons why we might want to leave it open or close it and whatnot. So, you know, it sounds like the general sentiment of the board members is we need some additional information. There might be some clarifications based on the planning board or whatever. And the legal briefs obviously are those, and they kind of stand on their own. Obviously, the gentlemen are all hearing this discussion, so I don't know that we have to clarify that very much. But what are our thoughts on the public hearing? Because we do need to clear that up.
Yeah, I think we have to leave it open.
Andrea?
I agree.
Okay, yeah, I kind of agree too.
And Kathy wanted it open, and I don't know about, you know, Judy.
Yeah, and obviously it gives lots of liberty, but I think we have to have some clarity to what information we would like to request, as we always try to do, because it's unfair to applicants to say we'd like additional information or something and not make it clear what we're looking
Right, and my request for briefs by the 16th is only that, a request. I mean, if you're
Right.
going to leave the public hearing open, then the rule is, you know, submissions to the Zoning Board of Appeals can be made up through the close of the public hearing, right? So
Right.
that's the whole point.
Yeah, and I
So
think,
it just would be much more helpful to
Yep.
have something in advance
But
that I can actually digest.
Ken, and I will say though, with the, when we table a public hearing and leave, or table an application to leave the public hearing open, it's usually because we want additional information from the applicant. And we always put a stipulation that that information has to come in 2 weeks prior to the meeting date. I don't understand why we should hold the applicant any different than anybody else in this case wanting to submit information to us to try to prove a point. Sure, they can submit it when they want, but I don't know to what degree we have to review it.
but I, yeah.
Well,
and
I think, let me just speak to that, Rick, because I think it's
Yeah,
important.
please, I'm just.
I think it is absolutely required that if factual information, testimony and evidence is presented to the board at any time up until the close of the public hearing, that it's part of the record and this board is obligated to consider it. How much weight it gives, that's a different issue. But it must consider it. Legal brief is different. Legal brief is not factual information. A legal brief is not, or a legal memorandum is not factual information. It's not testimony. It's not evidence. It's their arguments and their case law. I'm asking for that in advance. I don't want to have a back and forth where I have one side brief it and then the other side responds and the other side responds. That's why I'm asking, get them to me by the 16th of February, whatever legal memorandum you want to submit, so we have that. If you submit something after that, I may or may not look at it, being that it is not, I mean, it'll go to the board, but you know, I can't promise that it's going to be, you know, I'm going to have the time to evaluate it in the same way.
Ken, is it possible to vote to close the public record on February 15th? Is that possible to do today, where we are leaving the public record open for written submissions?
Yep.
But it closes on February 15th, period. So if written submissions aren't in by then.
Yes, but I mean, I was the one advocating for closing the public hearing, but let me tell you why you don't want to do that from what I've heard, because some of you have questions. So you get written submissions and then we get to our March meeting and you want to ask those questions and you really can't ask those questions and can't take new evidence in unless you reopen the public hearing at that point in time.
it could be silly, right?
You know,
But,
so.
I do want to say, in all honesty, and this is a strong, I don't want to repeat to next meeting of what went on tonight with going back and forth. We don't do that. I mean, and I just found that, well, I just, that's why I would say close it.
Yeah, I think we can avoid that too, Judy. I sort of jumped in sort of silently and muted everyone there when it started going back and forth. I think we just need to be a little bit more, when somebody's done talking, they get muted so that they don't accidentally jump in and start interrupting somebody else.
Dennis did a good job. He had a hard
Oh,
job.
and Dennis's comments were on point, Dennis.
Right.
Yeah, well, we have to have some decorum here, and we've stood on these principles. It has nothing to do with this application. This is how we always handle it, because we could have these debates every night between professionals, and you know, while they might be interesting to somebody, it's not really what we're here to do. That's why we're tasked to do this. So I think we made it clear. But yes, the technology could certainly help if someone doesn't want to listen, because it's not the Jerry Springer show here. So we're not going to go back and forth for some value. Okay.
So I think there's three options here. Option one is close the public hearing tonight. Tell them to submit legal briefs by the 16th, and you know, that's it. We're done, and then we're done. Two is leave the public hearing open. Just leave it open, and they can hopefully submit their legal briefs by the 16th, but they can present evidence and testimony right up through the close of the public hearing at your next meeting. And the third option is, as Andre has suggested, say that the public hearing is closed, but written comments will be accepted through a specific date. But that precludes you from asking questions once you get to that March meeting, unless you vote to reopen.
All right.
I guess I'd go with option number two, Ken.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, because I think it's pretty clear to the professionals listening that if they really would like careful consideration of the legal briefs or whatever they submitted, if they submit them the day before, that it's not going to really be considered very well. So that's really their option, I guess, Ken, to, how they would like to submit it. We're certainly asking for courtesy here so that we could do a professional analysis as they would wish or anyone else would wish. So, okay. All right. So is everyone okay with then leaving the public hearing open?
Yeah, and I guess my question is, can we just leave the public hearing open, period? Do we have to tell anybody what we're looking for?
Right.
I mean, we can make the requirement that we're tabling it because we need to do seeker on it. And maybe because we're waiting to hear what the planning board might say. And that's why we're tabling it and keeping the public hearing open.
Yeah, and there's been no secret to the rest of the discussion, which is the
Right.
same in many applications. We don't write down exactly, give us this and give us that, right?
Right.
Okay.
It's, I know, useful to give reasons as to why we're tabling it because it's cues to the applicant. It is absolutely not required.
Okay.
Somebody makes a motion to table, it's a non-debatable motion.
Yeah.
You make a second, you take a vote, you're done.
All right, good.
See, Ken and I are on the same wavelength because I wrote it up to table it. And I
Okay.
did not have a reason.
All right. Well, how about proceeding then?
All right, I move to table application 2A-01-22 until our March 2022 meeting.
And keep the public hearing open.
And keep the public hearing open.
Second?
Second, please.
Second.
Thanks.
The motion is to table and keep the public hearing open. Ms. Schwartz,
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins Wright,
Yes.
Mr. Mites,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mr. Primo.
Yes.
Motion to table, keep the public hearing open, carries.
Okay. So we've finished the agenda and now we have old business. And we have two applications from January where we requested some additional information and assistance. So Andrea, you have the first one, which is.
And Heather, you're still recused on these two, I believe, as well.
I think she was last month.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Okay. So information was given to all the board members related to this. Andrea, it's your application 1A07. Do you have
Yep.
thoughts?
No, I'm good.
Good.
I'm ready to make the motion.
Okay. Does anyone else have any concerns about the materials we received? Okay, I'm good too. Go ahead, please.
So this motion is made in regards to application 1A-07-22. Whereas on or about December 9th, 2021, Save Monroe Avenue, Inc., in parentheses, 2900 Monroe Avenue LLC, Cliffords of Pittsford LP, Alexco Land Services, Inc., Julia D. Kopp, Mark Boylan, Ann Boylan, and Steve M. DePerrier, and parentheses, collectively SMA, and parentheses, filed application 1A-07-22, in parentheses, the appeal, and parentheses, with the Town of Brighton Zoning Board of Appeals, parentheses, the ZBA, end parentheses, appealing the Town of Brighton Building Inspector's issuance of building permit number 2021-0374, parentheses, the fourth building permit, end parentheses, and building permit number 2021-0373, parentheses, the fifth building permit, end parentheses, to the Danielle Family Companies, parentheses, the developer, end parentheses, for the Whole Foods Plaza project located at 2740 Monroe Avenue, 2750 Monroe Avenue, 2800 Monroe Avenue, a portion of 175 Allens Creek Road, and a portion of 2259 Clover Street. And whereas the appeal requests that the ZBA, one, annul and reverse the issuance of the 4th building permit and the 5th building permit. 2, determine that the developer has failed to confirm that it has met all of the required conditions set forth under New York state law and in the Brighton Town Code and the incentive zoning and site plan approvals necessary for the issuance of the 4th building permit and the 5th building permit. And 3, award SMA all costs and fees associated with the appeal. And whereas on January 5th, 2022, the ZBA held a regular meeting which was duly noticed and published as required by law. And whereas on January 5th, 2022, the ZBA held a properly noticed public hearing with respect to this appeal. And during the public hearing, all persons desiring to speak on the appeal were heard, and such persons also submitted documents and other correspondence for consideration by the ZBA, and all those materials were considered by the ZBA as part of the record for the appeal. And whereas on January 5th, 2022, the ZBA closed the public hearing and commenced deliberations with respect to the appeal. And whereas on February 2nd, 2022, the ZBA held a regular meeting which was duly noticed and published as required by law, where the ZBA continued its deliberations with respect to the appeal. Now, therefore, on motion by myself, Andrea Wright, I hereby move that the following resolutions be made. Number 1, resolved that each of the whereas clauses in this resolution are incorporated by reference as specific findings of this resolution and have the same effect as the other findings herein. And further resolved that after duly considering all of the evidence before it, the ZBA in all respects accepts, approves, adopts, and confirms the findings set forth as attachment A, which findings are incorporated herein in their entirety. And further resolved, in accordance with the records, proceedings, and findings set forth as attachment A, the ZBA affirms the issuance of the 4th building permit and the 5th building permit. And further resolved, in accordance with the records, proceedings, and findings set forth in attachment A, this appeal is denied.
The second?
Yes, second.
Ed,
Ed?
Yeah.
The motion is to deny application 1A0722. Ms. Schwartz,
Yes.
Mr. Mites,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mr. Primo,
Yes.
and Ms. Tompkins Wright.
Yes.
The motion to deny carries.
Okay. All right. So we have 1A0822, which relates the same. Ed, your thoughts?
Yep.
You're all set?
I'm all set. We have all received the draft resolution and the attachments, and I agree with them and ready to go forward.
Okay.
Whereas, I move that we resolve as follows. Whereas on or about December 10, 2021, Brighton Grassroots LLC, defined as BGR, filed application 1A-08-22, the appeal with the Town of Brighton Zoning Board of Appeals, the ZBA, appealing the Town of Brighton Building Inspector's issuance of building permit number 202-10374. The 4th building permit and building permit number 202-10373, the 5th building permit to the Danielle Family Corporation, the developer for the Whole Foods Plaza project located at 2740 Monroe Avenue, 2750 Monroe Avenue, 2800 Monroe Avenue, a portion of 175 Ounce Creek Road, and a portion of 2259 Clover Street. And whereas the appeal requests that the ZBA, 1, determines that the developer has failed to confirm that it has met all the required conditions set forth under New York state law and in the Brighton Town Code and the incentive zoning and site plan approvals necessary for the issuance of the 4th building permit and 5th building permit. 2, annul and reverse the issuance of the 4th building permit and the 5th building permit. 3, grant the appeal. 4, order the developer to immediately stop work related to the 4th building permit and 5th building permit. 5, direct the relevant town employees to immediately issue a stop work order to the developer with respect to any work related to the 4th building permit and 5th building permit. And 4, award BGR all costs and fees associated with the appeal. And whereas on January 5, 2022, the ZBA held a regular meeting, which was duly noticed and published as required by law. And whereas on January 5, 2022, the ZBA held a properly noticed public hearing with respect to the appeal. And during the public hearing, all persons desiring to speak on the appeal were heard, and such persons also submitted documents and other correspondence for consideration of the ZBA, and all of those materials were considered by the ZBA as part of the record for the appeal. And whereas on January 5, 2022, the ZBA closed the public hearing and commenced deliberations with respect to this appeal. And whereas on February 2nd, 2022, the ZBA held a regular meeting, which was duly noticed and published as required by law, where the ZBA continued its deliberations with respect to the appeal. Now, on my motion, I move that we resolve as follows. Resolved, each of the whereas clauses in this resolution are incorporated by reference as specific findings of this resolution and shall have the same effect as the other findings herein. And be it further resolved that after duly considering all the evidence before it, the ZBA in all respects accepts, approves, adopts, and confirms the findings set forth as attachment A, which all of us have received, which findings are incorporated herein in their entirety and resolved in accordance with the records, proceedings, and findings set forth as attachment A. The ZBA affirms the issuance of the 4th building permit and 5th building permit, and be it further resolved in accordance with the records, proceedings, and findings set forth as attachment A, the appeal is denied.
Do I have a second?
Second, please.
I'll second. Member Wright.
Okay.
The motion is to deny application 1A0822. Ms. Schwartz,
Yes.
Mr. Mites,
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt,
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins, right?
Yes.
Mr. Primo.
Yes.
The motion to deny carries.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, that was fun. Okay. So, yeah, I think we're good. And then we'll see what all the other materials we have back. So, and go from there. All right, everybody, have a good night. Thanks very much.
Yeah, happy
Thank
February.
you.
Kathleen, feel better.
Oh, I
Yeah.
appreciate
Feel
it. Thank
better.
you.
Yep.
Yeah, Kathy, I hope you feel better. I
Thank you.
was unhappy to hear that news for you.
I know, me too. But luckily it's not bad. So let's hope it stays that way.
That's self-esteem.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, take care, everybody.
Take
Bye.
care, guys.